Okay, that leads us to 19B4. I believe we're going back to Ms. Gomez. That's Infotech Career College Vocational Nursing Program. Ms. Gomez, we've received your report and we've reviewed it in full. Do board members have any questions for Ms. Gomez at this time? I actually do have a question. I just want to confirm how I'm reading this. It appears to me that this school has been on provisional since 2011. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any further questions for Ms. Gomez from board members? Ms. Norton?
So, because I was somewhat bothered by this school's been on since 2011. The other school had been on for a year, and we took away their school. So what is the difference between that school and this school and your recommendations?
This one's pass rates have gone up rather than down.
Can you pull the mic closer to you?
Pull the whole box. Yeah.
This pass rate has gone up rather than down. They did have 2 quarters that was low again, but they're going back up. So their pass rates are not just continuously going down. Also, they're correcting their violations. And so it's a big, it was very different way of looking at them. One is correcting their violations, the other had not.
Dr. Brown?
And just to add, I want us to be very mindful that we are not comparing schools with in each other. And also remember, the regulation reads that you have to at least demonstrate incremental progress. Again, appreciating that we should not be comparing schools to each other. The last school, year over year, continued to have the same violations and then additional violations. Here, we do see, while it has been since 2010, we are seeing marked improvement, and you're going to have the pass rate be out there until they have more additional classes to raise that. But I just want us to be very mindful about comparing schools as well as timeframes.
Just comparing methodology.
And I do see that the most recent pass rate is 75%, correct? And have all the violations been corrected, or are there violations outstanding?
The only thing that they're working on now is their curriculum, and this is why the delay to extend their provisional and to deny the class that they had requested, was simply because they have not completed the curriculum revision yet. They're working on it. They've hired a consultant, and now they've gotten a new director as of last week that is going to be working with the program. So she's been up to our building, and I see that she's really working hard on getting this curriculum.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments for our NAC, Ms. Gomez? Okay, at this time, is there a representative from Infotech Career College Vocational Nursing Program here?
We received a letter from her stating that she agreed with it's in your packet that you received today, that they agree with the recommendation and that they were not going to come.
Okay, so the letter that we received in our packet indicates that they do agree, and they were not able to be here today. Any further comments or questions by board members? Dr. Baste-Martinez?
Madam President, I move that we accept the NAC's report.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. So at this time, I'll call for further public comment. Does any member of the public have comment on agenda item 19B4, Infotech Career College? Okay, I don't see any at this time. Further discussion by the board? I don't see any. Start a roll call vote. Starting on my far left, Mr. Deerking.
Yes.
Ms. Norton.
Yes.
Mr. Vertito.
Yes.
Vice President Moreno.
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Ms. Endozo.
Yes.
Dr. Baste-Martinez.
Yes.
Mr. de Brownstein.
Yes.
Mr. Ma.
Yes.
Okay, unanimously, the motion passes. Thank you. 2, 3, 4. Okay, moving on. That takes us to 19B5. Let me see if I can get there. St. Joseph College of Nursing Program, Vocational Nursing Program. Ms. Gomez, you're still with us? We've received your report. We've reviewed it. Do board members have any questions for Ms. Gomez at this time?
I don't know if she would be the one to answer the question, but this letter that we received says that the school didn't ask to be on this agenda?
From St. Joseph?
Yes. Says, I was shocked to see that we were on the Board of Vocational Nurse agenda for November 4th. Please note, we did not ask to be reconsidered, nor did we ask for more students. Please remove us from the agenda.
Not sure who would be the best person to clarify that. Yes, I see. Was the school notified that they were on the agenda?
The school was notified when the packets went out that they were going to be on the agenda. The initial reason that they were put on was because of a student complaint and an on-site visit that was made. And I was able to verify that there was only one violation or concern that was with the complaint. Everything else was, I could not identify as being correct. And so and during the time I was there was a conversation that it might be nice to be on so we could get off of provisional early. And so,
So per their written communication, they are not requesting the students,
they're not requesting students.
yeah, and did not ask to be on the agenda. Any further board discussion? Mr. Brownstein?
So will this current recommendation change anything? Because I understand that it's their belief that they'll be on the February 2016. So will they stay on the February 2016, or would they need to request that?
They would stay on the February one.
Okay.
So can we somehow ensure that they are put on the February 2016? 17, I'm sorry. February 2017. Okay, I'm hearing from our Assistant Executive Officer that they are automatically on. So we have confirmation of that. Is there a motion on the floor?
I'll make it that we accept the NEC's recommendations. I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment about the motion on the floor concerning 19B5 St. Joseph School of Nursing?
I mean, I just set up, so I'll have.
Oh,
Who's?
yes, please. I'm sorry, I thought because of your letter that you were not actually here. Please, come up. Find a seat that you're comfortable in. So you've heard our board discussing the letter that you sent, and I apologize for not recognizing you in the audience. Would you like to introduce yourself to the board?
Yes, good afternoon, board members. My name,
No, it was on.
You turned it off.
good afternoon, board members. My name is Nicky Joseph. I'm here from St. Joseph's.
And would you like to make a statement to the board?
Yes, we were shocked
Okay.
to be on the agenda. We have made very steady progress. Our pass rates have gone up dramatically, 100% all of 2015. And in 2016 as well, too, our pass rates have stayed up. So we've made steady and incremental progress in the right directions. We've been working very well with Ms. Gomez to be in compliance and correct any issues or concerns or violation. We were scheduled to be automatically for 2017. I believe that will be the 2-year mark to be considered to be removed of provisional. And so we were looking forward to work with Ms. Gomez to just really outline exactly where we're at with the incremental progress and what needs to be done to be at that milestone.
And I do, looking at your past scores, and I see out of the last 6 quarters, you've had 500% and 167%. That was 2 out of 3 passing. I have one question for you. I see a lot written in the report about students not taking the HESI exam, which was, if I can find it, part of your admission criteria. It says the board records confirm that the program has an approved admission criteria on record that include pre-admission HESI testing, but that instead, the students are receiving a scholastic level examination. Is that right?
Correct. And I worked that out with Ms. Gomez. We initially submitted that correction with Ms. Pam Hinckley, and there was some miscommunication there. They were doing the scholastic level. We implemented the HESI, and that's what has helped with the pass rate on the subject level for fundamentals, med search. At each level, instead of just as an admissions test, we are actually doing at each level. And we use the scholastic for the math and reading comprehension. And we submitted the correct version for approval to Ms. Gomez.
So you will not be using the HESI, you'll be using the SLE.
Correct. And then the HESI is used during the levels because their subject matters, yes.
Ms. Gomez?
Their policy that had been approved had the HESI as an entrance exam also. This was an approved policy, that admission and screening that they had sent in to us. It was in correction of a violation. Previously, they had rewritten their policy. So the student complaint was that she had been told that there would be a HESI exam coming in. This was the only thing that I found, that they had been using the SLE instead of the HESI. So they were not using the approved admission and screening policy.
Is the violation now corrected?
They've resubmitted a new policy to revert back to the SLE and not use the HESI exam.
So it's in process, is what you're saying. Do board members have questions for St. Joseph representative? Mr. Brownstein?
Just one you heard the motion, you're clear, and the motion made sense with your intention with the letter? Yes, okay, thank you.
So if I understand, is the motion to be in February?
I can't hear you. Say it again.
I'm not sure I understand the motion. Is it to be on the February agenda?
That would,
So the motion is to accept the NEC recommendation. The NEC recommendation is to deny your request for removal, early removal from provisional, continue the provisional approval for 1 year from November 30th, 2016 to November 30th, 2017. And then it goes on, there's 8 in total. Continue to require the program director to submit the names of all enrolled students no later than 15 days after commencement. Continue the program's requirement to admit no additional students unless approved by the full board. Continue to require the program to complete the evaluation of current curriculum and complete major revision prior to admission of additional students. And continue to require the program to comply with all approval standards of the Nurse Practice Act. Continue to require the program to demonstrate incremental progress in correcting the violations. If the program fails to satisfactorily demonstrate incremental progress, the full board may revoke the program's approval. And the last one is place the program on the agenda of the board's November 2017 meeting for reconsideration. However, per your letter and per confirmation from Ms. Anderson, we're moving to put you on the February 2017 agenda. Is that your wish?
Yes, my wish is not to accept a recommendation because we never requested for any of it. It's just to be, I believe we're being punished because with the last request, we did not have to come to the full board to request for additional students. And also, we were scheduled automatically to be in February. And I believe strongly that we've put a lot of effort on really working with students to ensure pass rates went up. We invested a lot of time on really the academia with the students, and the pass rates show it. So we were scheduled for February. The recommendation, said November.
Previous one?
Correct.
This one?
This one. And it also says to come to the full board for approval, and which is like a step down from where we were at the last meeting.
Now, it's my understanding for schools on provisional approval that you must come before the board am I incorrect? That it's standard to come before the full board to request a new cohort of students.
We had 20 students start in May, and we were not required to come for the full board.
Is their requirement was not previously to come before the full board?
There was a short period of time where the board had given permission for the executive officer
Okay, I
to
remember
make
now.
that decision.
Okay, I got you now.
I mean, it sounds to me there was some kind of miscommunication that prompted your school to be placed on today's agenda. And while on the one hand, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, I prefer you not be recorded as being denied, and instead we honor our original intention, which was to have you here February 2017. However, that's not the motion that's been proposed. So I will vote no to ask that we just bring you here 2017, and this is essentially tabled. That's what I'm hoping, that's what I'll support.
So, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Ma, about the miscommunication. So if we wanted to, in essence, disregard this as miscommunication and continue with our previous NEC report recommendation, how do we do that? We would table this? That's the most? Yeah, I know. Right, right.
I think there's a motion and a second, so we have to follow.
Yeah, I know that. But I'm just saying, is that even possible to, well, we could table, right? Right. Yeah, we have to vote first, but I needed that information to see if there was another avenue for us. So the motion's on the floor. It's been seconded, received comment, thank you. Let's actually have a roll call vote on the motion, current motion, which is to adopt the recommendations of the current report with the clarification that the school will come back in February 2017.
No,
With the
that's
addition.
not the motion. That's not the motion. The motion was, I thought, accept,
The motion was to accept the NEC report.
yes.
Without the correction of the February?
No, you shouldn't, we should, I don't think you want. Yeah, they're separate issues. I think you want to keep it that way. I don't think it's fair to say we've denied them
Yeah.
when we haven't really, they haven't given us a chance to give us all the materials. So I don't want that in the record to say we've denied them today.
So the motion is actually correct. I forget who made the motion. Mr. DeBronstein?
To accept the NEC's recommendation.
As is. Okay. Let's call for a roll call vote on that motion, starting with Mr. Ma.
No?
Mr. DeBronstein?
No.
Dr. Baste Martinez? Ms. Mendoza?
No.
I'm also a no. Vice President Moreno?
No.
Mr. Vertito?
No.
Ms. Norton? No. Mr. Deerking?
No.
Okay, so unanimously, we have voted to not.
So I move to table to the next meeting.
I'll second that.
So now the motion is to basically defer this in other language, to table this until the February 2017 meeting where you would come back. Any further public comment on the motion on the floor? Is there anything you would like to add, ma'am? Nope, okay. Okay. I don't see any further public comment coming forward. Further discussion by the board? Do not see any. So on the current motion, let's start with, on my far left, with Mr. Deerking.
Yes.
Ms. Norton? Yes. Mr. Vertito?
Yes.
Vice President Moreno?
Yes.
I'm also a yes.
Yes.
Ms. Endozo? Dr.
Yes.
Baste Martinez? Mr. DeBronstein?
Yes.
Mr. Ma?
Yes.
So it is unanimously voted to accept the motion, which is to table this.
Thank you.
Ma'am, do you understand the motion? Okay,
Thank you so much.
thank you. Okay, we're down to our last four schools, which are all consideration of request to admit students by programs on provisional approval. 19C1 is our first school, Carrington College, San Jose, Vocational Nursing Program. And I believe Ms. Gomez is still with us. It appears you're doing most of the heavy lifting today, Ms. Gomez. We've received and reviewed your report. Do board members have questions for Ms. Gomez at this time? I'm looking at mine, I don't have any questions, no. Is there a representative from Carrington College, San Jose? Thank you, ma'am, I know you were with us before, but could I have you reintroduce yourself for the record?
I'm Janice Montgomery, Carrington College Vocational Nursing Program Director. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Montgomery. And it would be helpful for us to know if you agree or disagree with the
I
recommendation.
agree with the recommendations of the consultant.
Thank you. Is there any further statement you would like to make to the board?
I just want to comment that we have worked very hard to increase the pass rates for the program over the past year, and we are planning to maintain that commitment to the students and the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any board member questions or comments for the school representative, Ms. Montgomery? Mr. DeBrownstein?
I want to thank you for your comments. I do appreciate your commitment to the students and to the community as you represented. And that being said, I would make the motion that we accept the NEC's recommendations as presented.
Second.
Hey, there's a motion on the floor. It has been seconded. At this moment, I would like to call for further public comment on the motion that's on the floor, either from the audience or from the school representative. Ma'am, is there further comment you would like to make?
No, thank you.
Okay. I don't see anyone coming forward from the audience. So at this time, I'll call for further board discussion. I see none. So we'll go to a roll call vote, and I'll start on my left with Mr. Deerking.
Yes.
Ms. Norton.
Yes.
Mr. Vertito.
Yes.
Vice President Moreno.
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Ms. Endozo.
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Baste Martinez. Mr. DeBrownstein.
Yes?
Mr. Ma. So unanimously, the motion passes. Thank you for being with us today. So that takes us now to 19C2, High Desert Medical College Vocational Nursing Program. Ms. Gomez?
Hello.
We've received your report.
My new drinks tonight.
Thank you.
We received your report and reviewed it in full. Do board members have any questions for Ms. Gomez at this time? Ms. Gomez, you have a comment?
Yes, there is a typo
Okay.
on this. On the recommendation, it should say that the class should begin on January the 9th, not October the 10th.
So January 9th,
9th, 2017, and graduate on March 28th, 2018.
March 28th,
Yes.
2018. So I'll read the new, the amended recommendation. Approve High Desert Medical College Vocational Nursing Program's request to admit a full-time class of 19 students to begin on January 9th, 2017, graduating March 28th, 2018 only, to replace the class that graduated on April 13th, 2015. Okay. So we have the amended recommendation. Any board member comments or questions for Ms. Gomez? I don't see any at this time. Is there a representative from High Desert Medical College here with us? Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us today. Oh, are you okay? Are you okay, ma'am? Okay. Please sit wherever you're comfortable. And your microphone is on. I see the red light. Oh, turned it off. There we go. Could you introduce yourself for the record if you would like to?
Good afternoon, Michelle Welch, Director of Nursing, High Desert Medical College.
Good afternoon, Ms. Welch. And it's helpful for us to know if you agree or disagree with the recommendation.
Thank you. I do agree with the consultant's recommendation.
Thank you. Is there any further statement you would like to make to board members?
No, we are very pleased with our graduating class pass rate and that we've had the opportunity to demonstrate the success of our curriculum revision, and we hope to continue to demonstrate that success.
I hope you do as well. I know that you didn't have any candidate tests for a long time, for 2 years. And I see now the last quarter is 90%, so that's great. Mr. Vertito?
Madam President, I'd like to move to accept the NAC report for High Desert College.
Does that include the amended recommendation?
Yes, it does, with amended, or is it corrected? Amended.
Corrected, I'm sorry.
With corrections,
Thank you.
yes.
Second.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor, and it has been seconded. Any further comment on the motion on the floor, either from the public or from the school's representative, Ms. Welch? Is there anything more you'd like to say?
No, thank you.
There's a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. We've had public comment. Further board discussion at this time, Mr. Vertito?
Ms. Welch, I've seen you take over this program, and you've guided it, and congratulations. I know you put a large amount of work into your school and get your students around, A pass rate of 90% is something to be congratulated after your hard work. Well done.
Thank you.
And let's keep it up.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. Okay, at this time, I'd like to take a roll call vote, starting on my left with Mr. Deerking.
Yes.
Ms. Norton? Yes. Mr. Vertito?
Yes.
Vice President Moreno?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Ms. Endozo?
Yes.
Dr. Baste Martinez? Mr. DeBrownstein?
Yes?
Mr. Ma?
Yes.
Unanimously, the motion passes. Thank you. Ms. Gomez, are you leaving us?
Hey, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Okay, then that takes us to agenda item 19C3, Homestead Schools Incorporated Vocational Nursing Program. And I would like to point out, we did also receive written correspondence from Homestead Schools. And so you'll be able to find that in your packets, board members. And we have Ms. Ziegler with us. Good afternoon. We have received and reviewed your report. Do board members have any questions for Ms. Ziegler at this time? I do not see any. I know that there is written correspondence. I do not want to assume that does not mean that there is no representative here. Is there a representative from Homeschools Incorporated Torrance? Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Please sit where you feel comfortable. Would you like to introduce yourself for the record?
I'm Adele Blanco, the Program Director of Homestead Schools Incorporated in
Good af-
Torrance.
Good afternoon, Ms.
Good
Blanco.
afternoon.
I see in your letter that you sent to us, it says that you respectfully disagree with the report and recommendations of the nursing education consultant, and you give us the reasons. Would you like to make further comment in addition to your written response?
Yes, I would. Again, let me repeat, Homestead Schools Incorporated respectfully disagrees with the report and recommendation of the nursing education consultant for the following reasons. On September 20th, 2016, our chief academic officer and I were granted a meeting with supervising NAC, Ms. Anderson, and programs consultant, Ms. Ziegler. On this day, in an effort to correct all issues and to seek guidance from the board, we have presented all our findings regarding the board-approved instructional plan to both supervising NAC and programs consultant. In that meeting, it was agreed that both Ms. Anderson and Ms. Ziegler that the board-approved instructional plan needed to be revised due to the facts that we have presented. As a director of nursing program, after careful analysis of the curriculum, I realized perhaps part of the reason students are having difficulties with the program is due to the poor presentation of the approved curriculum plan. However, despite all these, I'm trying to do my very best, working tirelessly just to help our students while following the current approved instructional plan. Number 2 reason, since the proposed class will not commence until January 17th, there will be time for the implementation of the approved revised instructional plan. Without a class start, there will not be a mechanism in which we can evaluate the effectiveness of the revisions. Number 3 reason, the third quarter pass rate of Homestead Schools is 88% year to date, which is 16% over the state average pass rate. As written on the report, we're happy to say that we had been in compliance with California Code of Regulations, Section 2530L. Number 3rd reason, as a director, the comment of the NSC regarding my egregious lack of clinical judgment by the director when placing the student in the clinical rotation is unwarranted and offensive. For 3 decades that I worked with the board as a capacity of a director, I had never done egregious lack of judgment. In this professional field of nursing, there's no place for that kind of strong language. And there should not be any director or anybody does not deserve this kind of language for that matter. Number 4, we sincerely ask that the board will consider this good faith effort and grant us this request so that we can evaluate the effectiveness of the revised instructional plan. And we are submitting it in November 15.
Thank you. That was actually my question to you, was I saw the date of November 15th, and I said, it's November 4th already. So my question was, you have prepared the revised curriculum?
Yes.
And the lesson plans?
Yes,
And they will be,
submitted November 15th
okay,
with electronic and all that stuff.
all the things that. Do board members have any questions of Ms. Blanco at this time? Okay, is there a motion on the floor? Yes, Mr. Mon.
I have a question. So, yeah, could you tell me, so I'm a public member, I'm not a licensee, what happened that in the observation, what did you observe, and can you put it in a way that I might understand as a layperson?
Okay.
And just to remind everyone, the quote that Ms. Blanco referenced is on page 11 at the bottom. Okay.
It's good.
Hello? Okay.
Yep.
Yes. The program submitted a comprehensive analysis on October 5th, and in my analysis of that report, I read that the director, in their observations of the faculty at the clinical setting and also in the classroom setting, were not performing effectively, meaning that the faculty members were not following the syllabus, they were not following the lesson plans during theory. The student evaluations also, as the director had interpreted them, read that the students found that the instructor was not presenting the information in a manner so that the students would be able to learn the material effectively and apply it in the clinical setting. Further, the director wrote in her analysis that in her visit to the facility, she observed that the faculty members were ill prepared to teach the lesson for the day to the students. Therefore, the students, without having prior knowledge of the theory, are not able or capable of taking care of patients at the bedside without having that prerequisite knowledge beforehand. Therefore, having that practice, that impairs the safety of the patients at the bedside.
So it reads here that there was a consultant's observation. So is this a literal observation? Were you there, were you individually there, seeing this in the classroom?
No, it is the observation came in written form, but it was an eyewitness observation of the director. My observation came in interpreting her report.
Okay, and then so remind me then, who was the author of the document that you reviewed?
Ms. Blanco.
Ms. Blanco. Okay, so basically, you read a report that Ms. Blanco wrote and sent to you, and then you interpreted what she told you as being unacceptable. Is that fair to?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Norton.
So could we have the response from Ms. Blanco? She evidently took your own report that you wrote and applied her
Yes.
knowledge base to it and came up with that.
I
determination.
observe those in the clinical area because I literally go there every term. And so I corrected that because before, when I was here, I was doing the Bloom's taxonomy of learning. In every meeting that I have, I am giving educational lecture to the faculty. Also, when I observe the faculty, and as Ms. Ziegler was saying, that I said that, but in the comprehensive analysis, there is also a column in there, what I have done, that I corrected those, that I literally, and what I'm saying, that I did not have egregious lack of clinical judgment by placing those faculty and the students, because students have rigorous tests before they go. But when I observe that, then it has to be corrected, and I did correct that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further board member questions for either Ms. Ziegler or Ms. Blanco?
Yeah, so I have
Mr.
another, yeah, so Ms. Blanco, so Ms. All right.
Blanco?
Yes, regardless, so your own report was the basis for the NEC's findings. How would you characterize what you observed and allowed? I mean, so you saw something that warranted enough that you reported it. So for that, I feel like you get a certain amount of credit, right? Like you're self-reporting something. What did you think you saw, and what were you trying to say in the report to the NEC?
What I was trying to say to the NEC is that because of the fact that I have the instructional plans that I inherited, because I just, assumed the directorship a year ago, that I will have to work harder to make sure that I will correct that. And that's why I ask the guidance of both of the Ms. Cheryl Anderson and her, so that I can revise the instructional plan and the lesson plans so that my students and my faculty will be stronger as far as that is concerned, and not because of my lack of judgment.
Do you think you put, I think I know your answer will be, but do you think you put consumers at risk by allowing your students in those settings?
No, because I, as a director of nursing, I also have the same rules and regulation that the board has, that we have to protect the consumer safety.
Mr. Ma, does that answer your question?
I mean, it does in some ways. I mean, on the other, I feel like, again, there's a bit of miscommunication here, that whatever you wrote, and I didn't see it, and I don't necessarily want to see it, and nor would I be qualified to review it, conveyed a level of significance and severity that prompted our team, our group and our as subject matter experts, it raised a flag for us, right? And it said, whoa, there's something strange going on here, and it's serious, and serious enough that it made it into the rationale of our report. And now, and you were the primary observer of it, so it wasn't as though we saw it. So I don't know if you wrote it in a way that was alarming, overly alarming, or what you did, what you described is what you did, and it is more alarming than you're giving it credit for. I don't know what the truth is. So it makes it, I think, very difficult for us to know, since you are the only witness and you are the author of the report. But take this away, your words are what prompted this interpretation.
Thank you. Do board members have further questions or comments for Ms. Ziegler or Ms. Blanco? I don't see any. Is there a motion on the floor at this time?
Motion to accept the NAC report.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor and it has been seconded. This time I'd like to, Public comment first. This time I'd like to call for further public comment on the motion that has been put forth, either from Ms. Blanco or from the audience. Ms. Blanco, are there further comments you would like to make to the board?
Don't worry, I think we'll have questions for you, so.
Okay, at this time, I would like to call for further discussion by the board. Let's go with Mr. Ma and then Ms. Norton.
So I mean, hearing what you hear now, does this change at all your feelings about the risk at which consumers were placed?
No, it does not. I'm still very,
I can't hear you, sorry.
I'm still concerned with the director's judgment in leaving the students in the clinical setting, knowing that there is this major problem going on. Another salient comment that the director made, and also in the findings that I've discovered, there is no remediation for a student who is in the clinical setting. What that means is that a student is not being evaluated on their performance while they are at the clinical setting.
So I guess what I'd like to know is, I would feel more comfortable if you two talk, you know, and figure out where the disconnect is, because you're both using the same, it's the same event, it's the same report, and one of you is, I'm doing a good job, I know what I'm doing, and another's like, you're putting patients at risk and consumers at risk, and we can't be that far apart. I mean, I lean towards the licensees about this, because I don't know anything about teaching, but that's what it sounds like to me.
Ms. Blanco, did you have something?
As a director of nursing, I do not put the consumers at risk. And I'm not putting all those mediocre students in the clinical area. In my report, I said that I observed that, so I did something about it. That's the reason that prompted me for coming up front and says, I look at the curriculum and I look at this, and this is probably why my students are struggling. So I asked Ms. Anderson and Ms. Ziegler for a meeting, and we all agreed that I have to do the revisions of both my instructional plan and my lesson plans that to be submitted on November 15. What I ask is to give me that class so that I can implement that new instructional plan that will be submitted. And since my class is not starting until January, I asked the board January 17, it wasn't 16 because 16 is a holiday, to ask the board to grant me that request for 24 students.
So you were saying that you observed the incident or the occurrence and then took steps to remedy?
Yes, yes.
I believe that our Assistant Executive Officer, Ms. Anderson, may have some comment. Would you like us to bring a microphone to you? Are you sure? Okay. Ms. Anderson, maybe you can help clarify some of the discussion.
Yes. First of all, Ms. Blanco is correct. We did meet on September 20th. We did identify deficiencies in her curriculum, and I did identify and request that she to make revisions in the curriculum that's there. That being said, that curriculum, her revisions are due November 15th. Following that submission, we still have to have time to go over it to be sure that it's ready to be implemented. That's why the denial now. That doesn't say that we can't, it won't be ready to be implemented in February, but certainly we can't say that a curriculum is approved when we don't even have the package at this point.
Hasn't been submitted.
So we do need to have that package, and the consultant does need to have time to review it. Now, at that point, once it's reviewed, I will meet with Ms. Blanco, Ms. Ziegler again, and we will see if we can resolve whatever misunderstanding is there, and we will report back to you. But at this point, with the information that's there, as far as we were concerned, the appropriate decision and recommendation to you is to deny this class based upon what we have. If we already know we have a deficient curriculum, then it would be unprofessional of us and irresponsible to recommend to you to start another class with.
We're not that far down the road yet.
That's correct.
Haven't had.
That's correct.
Do board members have any questions for Ms. Blanco, Ms. Anderson, or Ms. Ziegler?
No, just to reiterate what we've already read, this school was before us in May, and we approved a 2-year period as far as extension of the provisional approval. And then in July, there were certain deficiencies that were noted. Maternity rotation schedule wasn't consistent with the board-approved instructional plan, including maternity clinical rotations being scheduled 2 months apart. Enrollment data provided by the program had discrepancies. Skills lab for pediatric and maternity rotations weren't shown in the assignment grids or even part of the instructional plan. It's a concern for me.
Yes, agreed.
Would this be one of those cases where the elements that need to be addressed can be done, and we can defer admission to and delegate authority to the executive officer?
Yeah.
Because that's what's, I think, I'd be fine with that. It's on the recommendations, but, yeah.
Because I think the next step for me was that things would work themselves out in time for the February board meeting to be seen by the full board. That's kind of the way I was seeing it.
Oh, their request, though, is for January 16. Now, I'm not saying they will make that, but I'm saying we could delegate it to the executive officer, so at least gives them a chance. If it doesn't make it, it doesn't make it. And because I don't feel like the details, to me, the details, I won't be able to offer any insight or guidance at this point. I think I see there was a bit of miscommunication. There's consensus that the curriculum needs revision, then that you need to work on it, and your test scores are good, you otherwise have a pretty good history. I'm comfortable if we delegate authority for the next admission to the executive officer.
Well, we have a current motion on the floor.
I know.
It is something different.
It's just this discussion, right?
Yes.
Yes, I understand.
So I'm not sure if
Can we amend the motion?
yes, I'm not sure who made it. That's what I was going to ask next. Mr. Vertito, with the new information, are you interested in amending your motion?
I would feel comfortable amending the motion as long as the personnel, if we got the packet, the time to review it, the time to evaluate it. Are we looking at shortening the?
I was going to suggest.
I think that the motion at hand is for it to be delegated to the executive officer.
As it stands now, they have a history of unsatisfactory performance, that unannounced program visits have been not satisfactory. I would prefer to bring them in front of the full board.
So leave the motion.
I would leave the motion as presented.
Madam,
Dr. Basne Martinez?
I believe staff was going to say something.
Oh, okay.
Did I misread that?
No, you didn't.
Ms. Anderson?
In terms of timing, and given the decision that you rendered in May of 2016 to bring them back to the full board, and given the issues that we're talking about today and a full curriculum revision, you've got holidays, the timing that it takes to review a total curriculum package and prepare documents for February, I don't know that it would be physically possible to do anything before the February board meeting. So we can put them back on the February agenda and bring her requests for a class admission at that time. That we will push for, but I don't see that we can do anything to get a class started in January, the middle of January.
So don't mistake what I'm saying. I'm not saying we need to make this target date of January. I'm not even suggesting we bring them back in February. In fact, what I'm proposing is that we've heard the issue. I think the board understand, well, maybe not everyone may not agree with me, but I feel like I understand where the discrepancies are, and I'm comfortable delegating that authority at this point to the executive officer. Once your group is comfortable with it and Kamika's okay with it, then we're good. That's where I am, but I may be in the minority.
Yes, and my comments are not addressing the issue of the term egregious. I'm past that. That's a whole separate issue. I'm talking about the curriculum revision, the things that have to be done to ensure the students are getting what they need, and the timing. That's why I'm saying that.
Dr. Brown, did you have something? No. Okay. So we have a motion on the floor, and it has been seconded. Any further board discussion? Let's vote on the motion that we have currently.
Madam President, please restate the motion. Make sure we all know what we're voting for.
Yes, the motion is to accept the NEC's recommendations as stated in the report.
And who moved? John moved and who seconded?
Dr. Baste Martinez. That being said, I would like to take a roll call vote on the current motion, starting with Mr. Deerking.
Yes.
Ms. Norton? Mr. Vertito?
Yes.
Vice President Moreno?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Ms. Mendoza?
Yes.
Dr. Baste Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. de Brownstein?
Yes?
Mr. Ma?
No.
Okay, so we have 7 yes, 1 abstention, 1 no vote, meaning the motion does pass. Thank you. Okay. We have one more school on the agenda. And Ms. Ziegler, I think this one is also yours? Okay. This is Agenda Item 19C4, West Coast Ultrasound Institute, Beverly Hills, Voc Nursing Program. Ms. Ziegler, we've received your report, and we have reviewed it. Do board members have any questions for Ms. Ziegler at this time? I don't see any questions for Ms. Ziegler. Is there a representative from West Coast Ultrasound, Beverly Hills here? Please come forward, sir. Feel free to sit wherever you feel comfortable. And if you could introduce yourself for the record if you like. You turned it off. There you go.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
I am Hani Nashed. I am the director of the program, West Coast Ultrasound Institute, Beverly Hills.
Thank you. It would be helpful for us to know if you agree or disagree with the recommendation. It would be helpful for us to know if you agree or disagree with Ms. Ziegler's recommendation.
Yes, I agree with what our consultant actually helped us to do, and I have been in continuous contact with her, emails and phone calls, and she helped me a lot actually to come to this point.
Great. Is there any other comment you would like to make to the board members?
No, actually, I have been assigned to my position since April 27, which is almost May, and I worked on those violations diligently, and I tried to do my best actually from the day number 1 to correct the violations. And I have been in contact with Ms. Ziegler, and before her, actually, Ms. Gomez, and with Ms. Cheryl Anderson, too.
I have a question for you. The recommendation number 4 says continue the program's requirement to submit a report to the board no later than November 30th.
I am preparing that, and I will send it to Ms. Ziegler.
So you're on track with
Yes.
that report. Are you willing to take questions from board members?
Yes.
Do board members have any questions for the school representative at this time? Mr. de Brownstein.
Sir, of the 15 students that are in the recommendation, how many do you have ready to go?
Currently, I have in the class 7 students, 5 from the batch which approved in January, and the 2 actually returning students from previous classes.
All right. Thank you, and I appreciate your other comments. I would move that we accept the recommendations of the NECs as presented in the report.
I'll second that.
Great. There's a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded. This time, I'd like to call for public comment, either from the audience or from the school representative. I do not see anyone coming forth from the audience. Sir, do you have any further comment you would like to make to the board?
No, thank you very much.
So there's a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Any further board discussion? I don't see any. At this time, I'd like to call for a roll call vote, starting on my left with Mr. Deerking.
Yes.
Ms. Norton? Yes. Mr. Vertito?
Yes.
Vice President Moreno?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Ms. Endozo?
Yes.
Dr. Baste Martinez? Mr. de Brownstein?
Yes?
Mr. Ma?
Yes.
Thank you. Unanimously, the motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so at this time, that does complete all of our schools. The remaining, we're, so what I was going to announce right now is that we have a few reports, but we also have two presentations. One from Mr. Ben Frank and one from Mr. Brett Kingsbury. I would like to move both of those reports up, being respectful of your time. This is Agenda Item 22 and 23. Who are we going first? Okay, so first, I would like to, can we take you second, please? Okay, sorry, Mr. Kingsbury. I would actually like to take 23 first, which is the report on and discussion of administrative and enforcement monitor Phase 2 results. And that's with Ben Frank, who is our administrative and enforcement monitor. I know that the board members did get another copy of the both executive summary and the full report of Mr. Ben Frank.
Is this the same as what we had?
Yeah. It's the same report, it's just not bound. And I see Mr. Frank coming up. Sit wherever you're comfortable. One comment I would like to make before we get started is this report has already been sent to the legislature. This report is not able to be amended. This report is not able to be changed in any way. It's already been sent to the legislature. DCA's response has also been sent. Our response will be forthcoming after our discussion with our sunset review report. So I appreciate Mr. Frank being here, but I just would like board members to understand that there can be no amendments at this time.
Was DCA's response in our packet for reference?
Simply a transmittal letter,
Oh, okay, so it was,
opinion or position.
And like I said, after we finish our discussion, we will craft our own response and submit it with the sunset review report. Mr. Frank, thank you for being here. I know you were here a couple weeks ago at our other location. How would you like to proceed? Would you like to give more of a presentation or accept questions directly from the board? It's up to you.
You just turned it off. Good job.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the board. I had not anticipated making a presentation. I made it last time. My understanding was I was invited again to answer additional questions that the members of the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Yes, some board members at our last meeting voted to table this item to this meeting. And yes, you did offer a very thorough and complete report and presentation last time. So at this time, I'd like to take board member questions of Mr. Frank. Who would like to start? Okay, so board members wanted this item tabled so they could further review and because there were questions, so who would like to start?
My recollection was that we were going to table it so that we could see it again with updated information, but that's no longer possible, right? Because this report's not final. That was my understanding as to why we brought it back, unless that was my understanding.
It was my understanding that was our hope. It appears that's not possible at this time.
Yes, 2 weeks ago, when the report was made, the question was asked to Mr. Frank if there were amendments could be made, and that he had, if I remember right, you had indicated at that time that the report was final.
That's correct.
That's correct. So, yes, Mr. Vertito. please.
Since I was the one who asked the question about updating the material, you've answered that saying it's already been sent. And you're absolutely right. That was the whole purpose of asking him to come back was, we wanted to incorporate current data, what the most current data was into the report to see if it would change the numbers a bit, maybe change the outcome of a few conclusions. I did not know it was set in the meantime in that time space. But on reviewing some of the data and some of the other stuff, since we're here, may I proceed with another question? Mr. Frank, in Chapter 7, you're dealing with leadership of the board. Can you talk about who you engaged in the chapter? Which of the leadership, what level? Were they a first-line manager, supervisor? Who did you engage to gather this information? And what information was used to form the section? Was it somebody that can overlook, do they supervise one section, multiple sections? Was it one with the EO or the assistant executive officer to get a full board perspective? Can you give me a little bit of information about leadership section on the report?
I'm confused, Mr. Vertito. You referenced Section 7, which is on the board member training and support. And so I'm confused as to where you're referencing the leadership team.
Okay. I'm looking at my notes, and it's for a different report, so I apologize. I'm going to withdraw the question. I apologize.
Okay, thank you. No problem.
Ms. Baste Martinez? No?
I really was not.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were motioning.
So,
Yes, Mr. Wong.
So I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I watched it because I'm nerdy that way.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, me too, actually. I regret watching it. No, but you and I've, at least in a previous meeting, I've asked about identifying some root cause analysis, so like how we got here. And I know you're looking at how to make things better, but I'm also concerned about how do we prevent this from happening again, right? What caused you to be involved in this? There was some weakness in our system, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so presumably you were here to address some of that and maybe not all of it, but what I haven't seen thus far in the 2 reports that I've reviewed, and you still have others to produce, maybe you can address the staffing levels as an implication to some of our problems, the role of DCA as an agency, and what that relationship should be insofar as partnering, oversight, audit. It's unclear to me, and also the governor's office in that what their role is. And one of the things I've noticed, I've been on the board I think for I don't know 4 years, 6 years now. Is it that long? I don't know if it's that long. I hope not. But in any case, what I've noticed is that we're really feeling the impact of having had only 6 board members, the minimum complement needed for many years. And when I first came on the board, I was that 6th board member. So we could only make quorum if everyone was there, and if someone went on a bathroom break, we lost quorum. And what the impact of that is that we now have this bimodal distribution of the membership in terms of experience and knowledge and institutional memory. And so at some point, we will lose Todd and John, and then we will have a very new board. I mean, really not a lot of board members who have been here very long, and I shouldn't be one of the more experienced board members with 3 or 4 years under my belt, and that's what it becomes. So a lesson learned, I hope, is that the governor keeps this board fully impaneled. It will need that level of support because we may lose people as we did. We've lost through several members in the last year. So I'd like some acknowledgement that this is a shared responsibility and a shared ownership, just like when we talk with our schools and the licensees, that we can't just operate alone as a vacuum as a board. We have key relationships and stakeholders that we need to partner with for us to be successful. And that includes everything from having a full complement of a board, a well-trained board, but also staffing levels, being able to have some flexibility with budgeting and getting our budget change proposals approved, getting things through HR. And I just haven't seen that kind of critical analysis yet, and I'm hoping you can at least make some mention of it if you think it's warranted. But my observation is, I didn't appreciate it at the time when I was first appointed, and I was that sixth board member, but I'm appreciating it now where it very well be that John, Todd, and I are gone in a couple of months. Don't do that. No, I'm being realistic. And that just may be the way it goes, right? But, and we're very passionate. I mean, every one of my colleagues here, I have a deep amount of respect for, because these are essentially volunteer positions, and they keep coming and they ask good questions, and we don't always agree, but we all respect we all respect one another. So I just want us to be, how do we prevent this from happening in the future? If someone was falsifying or not doing the right thing within the internal operations, how could that have been caught? Who could have caught it? Why wasn't it caught? And I just haven't seen that yet in your reports. I appreciate the work you're doing of how to make things go well today moving forward. But I think we have to do a little bit of reflection in the past to prevent it from happening again in the future. And I tend to think government forgets, government agencies seem to forget what happened, and then we repeat things again. So I hope you can help with that.
That's a tall order.
Thank you
but-
for your question and your statement, and I think I share and I understand your concerns. I hope I can answer and address some of it, and I hope I have done so adequately, even within this report, although there will be more analyses forthcoming in the next report and then possibly again over the next year. I would like to start off where sort of the glass half empty and glass half full. The scope of my assessment really is necessarily limited to this board. I'm not, it wasn't the focus, as you mentioned, and as we talked about, I think, at the first meeting, to assess blame. And the authorities that were involved in designing this legislation and implementing this were very clear to me that what they were looking for is an improvement plan. How do we right the ship and restore an effective, primarily enforcement program, and there's some other targeted administrative processes. It's not really about going back and doing a forensic analysis to identify and assess blame. Number two, the scope again is targeted very clearly in the legislation on this board and not on DCA, and certainly not on the governor's office to assess whether they did or did not do things properly. I share your concern, and I think everybody recognizes that you were hampered in your ability to oversee the board and properly perform all your duties, as you've stated before and as was stated in your Sunset Review report, by only having 6 members. That's self-evident. You don't need me to say it. What were the reasons for that would again get into me doing some analysis of that, which is outside of my scope. But the net effect of you only having 6 members certainly hampered your ability. Within those parameters then, really going at your last comments about how could, let's see, how did you say this? How could we have caught it or prevented it or whatever? I think certainly it's a significant share of the responsibility belongs with the board with respect to its oversight of the program. You're the first level of, this board is the first level of oversight. And I tried in section 7 specifically to talk about 2 areas that I think, or several areas, maybe 3 areas that are in there that are of most immediate concern that I think have been deficiencies with in recent years and going back some time, perhaps 10 years or longer. And that is, 1, in providing effective training and orientation for new members to bring them up to speed in terms of understanding the nature of the board's operations and programs and the other information that they need to do to enable them to effectively exercise their oversight, and having active and engaged committees, being even more familiar with certain aspects of the board's programs and operations, be it education, licensing, enforcement, or administration, so that, again, they can gather information, analyze it, and not be surprised suddenly learning like, oh, something's not what I thought it was in terms of the program. And then 3, I developed a sample performance reporting template, workload and backlog and performance reporting template, specifically for this board's enforcement program, that I think would be helpful in making sure that not only the committee, but the full board, DCA, and other oversight authorities would have current, accurate knowledge about what is occurring with the board's workloads, backlogs, and performance. And that just providing that information on a regular basis it won't assure effective oversight and intervention, but it makes it more possible that it can occur. It provides accountability and transparency that otherwise doesn't exist. And I even suggested that following its presentation, say to the full board through the enforcement committee, that information be posted on the board's website so that it's available to the public. And I think had those 3 strategies been implemented between 2010, 2013, 14, the likelihood that you would have had the problems you had occur without your knowledge, if you will, would have been much less, the risk of that. I don't think it was a staffing problem, just the last question you asked about the staffing. I think the problems that occurred were not the result of insufficient staff. This board was authorized, in fact, had a major BCP approved, and was, in fact, authorized significant additional numbers of enforcement staff. It is how those positions were created, how they were classified, how they were organized, and how the workload was restructured. So I talk about the organizational and workload restructuring. It was how that was accomplished that caused the disruption to the board's enforcement program. Not that it didn't have enough staff, but what it did with the staff that it had. This board got more staff, and the impact of that was worse performance rather than better.
Let me just follow up real quick. I'm going to just push back a little bit on it. So no one's actually ever said, I'm the only one that I know of who's ever said that having 6 members, I haven't seen it written this way. In fact, I feel like and I think I've only said it for the first time, maybe when I met with you, I said, having 6 board members for a long time really hurt us. And I haven't seen that in our sunset report, in any sunset report, in your report. So I'm saying it will validate things, and maybe we can put that in our supplemental report, but it doesn't emerge as one of the problem areas in your report.
My recollection is, and I could be mistaken, because I have a lot of information over the last 8 months.
Yeah.
But I thought there was a statement in your 2014 Sunset Review report, because I thought you maybe even lifted it out, that the board had difficulty making quorum because of the small number of members.
Yes, but when
I
believe that, but what I'm saying.
That's what I was referring to.
But I wouldn't have predicted, and again, lessons learned. I want this to be passed on in some way to the board and to the governor's office, the impact that it provides difficult oversight, real oversight. The idea that reports are going to help and transparency, my understanding was that we were getting reports, but the data was off. And so I don't know if more reports necessarily help in our oversight. I think maybe the committees, but anyway, I don't have much more to say. This is a done this is a done deal. It's a lot of work. It's clear, and and your work is, I'm not questioning that. I'm just asking, we still have you for a certain amount of time, and there's an opportunity to document what happened. Again, I'm not worried about the blame. I'm never interested, I'm rarely interested in the blaming question. I'm interested in the process question, the responsibility and the accountability lines, and I still don't have good answers, primarily because I think our boards are meant to be director strong, meaning we rely on the EO to do a lot of the work. And I don't think any of us as volunteers can commit to this being a 20-hour-a-month job or whatever, you know. So I think we have to find out what that mix is, and maybe best practices from other boards. But the options you've had here, I'm not sure it would prevent things in the future, is I guess what I'm getting at. And I want this to be a valuable tool to us. And so we'll talk, I'm sure, in the coming weeks and months. But you know, we get it. We got a lot of work to do and some heavy lifting. But it seems a little inappropriate to say the board alone should have been able to detect these, discipline, identify. I mean, it just seems a lot. And maybe, really what that means is it's the board president at the time, because even the way it is now, our structure is really board president heavy. That means if the EO might be, you know, off course, the president has to be on it, but all the other board members, we're at the mercy of, you know, we only know what we're told, and maybe that's not how we should do it. I mean, but
I think you're doing a very good job of articulating the problem, and it is not a problem that is easily solved. There's not probably a single, like, oh, if you do this, it's going to prevent it. And this Department of Consumer Affairs, just as one example, there's many other boards throughout the state, has, I think, 40 boards, and then some of those are bureaus. It's hard to keep all of them, you know, to have some process that says every one of them is always going to be, you know, performing at optimal levels.
And
hasn't happened.
And I will admit and confess my ignorance. I don't know what DCA does. I don't know how they impact me as a board member, and that's a problem. Like, I should be able to say, DCA provides me X, Y, and Z, or if I have a problem, I know to go to X, Y, and Z. So, again, I don't mean to ruffle political feathers. That's absolutely not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make it so we're a healthy board, and we're servicing and supporting the staff and the community and the schools and the licensees. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ma, and thank you, Mr. Frank, for your gracious response. Mr. Vertudo, please, and then Ms. Norton.
Thank you. Going back to, I puzzled out my notes, so I apologize. In the same chapter 7, basically, you did interview all the board members, but as my colleague clearly pointed out, we're part-timers. We're here roughly, we come together 4 times a year, and everything else is done by mail. And we meet outside that 4 times a year as needed. But day-to-day operations are centered around the executive officer. He or she, and I'm, you know, your predecessor, are responsible for day-to-day operations and making sure the board runs smoothly and that business is conducted on a day-to-day basis. We're a policy-making body, and we make recommendations or we vote on certain things. Based on that analysis, looking at your report earlier, you did interview all the board members, but my question is, going back to it, who did you interview on the leadership side who's here day to day as part of the data for that leadership chapter?
Talking about chapter 7.
Yes.
Looking at what's in that section, 1 second. That section is largely based, almost entirely based on the results of the survey that we administered with the board members in March and April, late March and April, which 9 of the members completed, in conjunction with my interviews with the board members, and which targeted specifically those topics that are addressed in there, which was the board member, if you will, self-assessment of the training they received, the committees, and their information provided to them historically. And many of you know we went back and talked, I think in your example, back to your appointment in 2007, if I recall?
2005.
2005, and then you were president 2007
Yes.
to 11. So it was over that entirety of that period is really what we were talking about. And we talked about the training, we talked about provision of information, we talked about committees, and that was really a primary focus of those interviews, and it was strictly for purposes of exactly addressing, providing this information in this section.
Then the error I see is that you only got half the information. None of us are full-time. We don't go to the office usually on a day-to-day basis. Our executive officer, the senior staff, even the mid-level managers, we listen to them. They give input to our executive officer or their managers. They run the board day to day, and you would think that since your report is trying to deal with a clog or a roadblock in the data, the people who are on the front lines doing it day to day would be a key component of leadership. The board does not come together frequently, but the managers and the supervisors at the board come together much more frequently, monthly, weekly, and I would hope that you would include or conduct an interview on the next report or even an addendum on this information on, if you want to solve a problem, talk to the people that do it day to day, see what their input is, see how they see it, because while you've done a good job of interviewing all of us, the people who really deal with this on a day-to-day basis from the executive officer down really need to be included in the problem-solving process. And I would urge you that you include not only our data, but take a look at it from their perspectives. It's a general who would be very sorry if he didn't listen to his frontline leaders and give him a good, clear picture of what he's facing over the horizon. Thank you.
And just before we get to Ms. Norton, I just wanted to, there was some talk of the survey, and we know that was the first survey that Chapter 7 was based on, was that first survey that we took in March, April, correct?
That's correct.
And so we had some timing coincidences and unusual events that came up. One is that we hired a new EO March 1st, and then your contract began, almost at the same time, very near. And so the first survey we did was mostly on historical and previous administrations, because that's what we knew at the time, and that's what got put into this report. Now, I know that we all did take a second survey. Will that be at all included in Phase 3, or we've moved past that?
Well, the short answer to that is no.
Okay.
The survey we conducted was administered during March and April to capture input from all the board members regarding all the topics that were in that survey. Some of those topics were targeted specifically to address the needs of AB 179, and in other cases, information was captured for use for the board for its own purposes. We talked about that survey in the first report, and I promised in that first report that we would provide you with the results of that survey in a subsequent phase report. In June, so that report was presented to you, I think the date was June 20th. You had the report before that. It was delivered to the legislature on July 1st. In late June, I prepared a recap of that survey. Anyways, Appendix A, a draft of Appendix A. And I distributed that to the DCA project manager, to your executive officer, and to the chief of enforcement to review and give me any feedback. I never got any questions or any comments about that, and it's over 10 pages long, I think, recap of all those survey results. And the subsequently, and there were a few places where I had highlighted that I wanted to follow up with individual members about some of their responses to the survey questions. As part of preparing the draft final second report, I prepared a sort of a final draft of that appendix, and I included that in the draft second report, which I again provided to, so this was now in September, to DCA's project manager, your executive officer, Dr. Brown, and Gina Bayless, the chief of enforcement. When we sat down on September 29th and 30th to review that draft report, Dr. Brown presented to us a second survey that she had administered to this entire group. That was the first I ever had any knowledge of or participation in any way in that survey. And I would not have agreed had I been asked, and when we did the first survey, we did so collaboratively, myself, the DCA director, project manager, Dr. Brown, and Gina Bayless. We collectively went through all the survey questions. We edited them, we modified them, we agreed on the transmittal of that survey to the members. We set up a process for them to complete the surveys and return it so that it came to me. And we structured the questions in that survey specifically to deal with certain issues and transitions in leadership that happened.
179.
Had we had that same collaborative process been used, we might have come to some type of agreement as to what subsequent survey to develop and administer and capture information that might be used for subsequent project or general board purposes. And I would have been happy to collaborate in that kind of thing had it ever been brought to my attention.
So the second survey
But-
is more internally generated.
That is an internal survey that I think has some problems with how it was constructed and how it was administered. And I certainly had, and my understanding, I've talked to, I had members tell me that had they known that survey was administered outside of this project, they would not have completed it.
So I apologize, just for clarity of everyone, one of the requests that was asked was just in regard to the survey, because the survey you guys took didn't actually involve any of the last 7 months. So based on Mr. Frank's timeline, you guys actually have not been engaged since June. So any feedback related to that survey would actually only captures prior to June, so it's not necessarily an accurate picture. We simply, the staff, in trying to support Mr. Frank, simply re-administered the exact same question. So there was no change but to highlight anything that you guys might have reflected from basically the first of the year, 2016, to present date. So more of exuberance, but there really was the questions were exactly the same. And just the last piece was that the results did not actually go directly to Mr. Frank. They actually went to DCA first. With these results, they also, including the free text as well as the answers, went to him as well for him to have time to review and submit into this report.
Went To who, sorry?
They did go to Mr. Frank, but he did not get those directly because he doesn't. The survey was administered by DCA Survey Monkey. In this particular instance, the board simply administered them, but all the raw data was available and could have been included in this report. So it was the exact same survey.
So the bottom line I'm hearing is the two surveys are apples and oranges.
I'm sorry,
Apples and oranges in a way that.
I don't know that the second survey validates.
He's actually seen it. They're the exact same questions.
Okay, I'm sorry, maybe I made a bad analogy. But I do see we have another person come forward, and
Hello.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm
please?
Brian Clifford. I am the contract manager. I have been working with Ben on this project. I just wanted to get clarification because the Survey Monkey, I did not see that. The first time I saw that was at the meeting with Mr. Frank. So
This is the original survey.
No, this is the second.
this is the second one.
I'm
So I'm not sure, it never came to DCA.
All right.
I was referring to the first survey, which goes to the solid team. The second went, and he was provided that raw data. I think what we're trying to say is that the board, again, in their attempts to support Mr. Frank as outlined in AB 179, we simply provided up-to-date information so that Chapter 7, if he's going to build off on what you guys should be doing as a board, could be off of current data versus what you guys actually submitted in April is reflective of the past two EOs. And so we were just trying to make sure that the accuracy of the data.
Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
I'm sorry, I'm Brian Clifford.
Hey, Brian, I'm Eric. What is your role in DCA in relation to this project?
So basically, I am the contract manager, so I provide oversight of Ben and make sure that we're achieving all of the, the things that we've laid out in the plan.
Okay, and then, so Ben, you're contracted through DCA?
That's correct.
Okay, and then you're essentially supervised by DCA, is that right? Or no?
The contract supervised by DCA, yes. Managed, supervised by DCA, but I don't know what you mean.
The language
I'm
in
an
AB
independent
179
contractor.
says
Brian
that he gets
doesn't
his directives from the director of DCA.
I guess I'm trying to get a sense of accountability, right? Again, that's kind of my lens, is who is accountable to whom, and, and I get that the legislature created the need, and you were, filling that.
I'm a servant of many masters
Yeah, yeah.
in this project.
It appears so, Mr. Frank, it appears so.
Oh, okay.
And you got one more coming. Yes, ma'am, if you could just please reintroduce yourself.
My name is Sarah Huckle. I work with the Senate Business and Professions Committee under the chairmanship of Senator Hill, who is the co-author of AB 179, which requested Mr. Frank as the enforcement monitor. It was our intention that he be an independent voice in reviewing the board and its operations. The contract itself was handled by DCA, so DCA manages the contract, but he, by the way, he has been an enforcement monitor for many other boards, and we're very happy with his work. He was meant to be autonomous. He does not have, his supervisor is the legislature nominally, but we trust him to do his work.
I appreciate that was the intent of AB 179. Some of the questions I hear, I also have had questions about, the relationship or how much input DCA has into the final draft, things like that. So thank you for that clarification, Mr. Ma.
Oh, wait, so I was under the impression that DCA didn't have a final say in this, right? Is that right, Mr. Frank, or no?
I have the final say on what's in the report, and I would just add that the board is welcome to provide me, and board staff and board members are welcome to provide me any information they want that they think will be helpful to me in understanding the issues, problems, and concerns that the project's to address. But that is different from me agreeing to just take carte blanche, something that the board members or board staff hand to me and set it into the report. If you have a survey you would like to administer and publish, compile and publish, you have all the autonomy in the world to do that on your own. I'm not the vehicle to do that for you.
My observation of this, just from taking one or two steps back, is that we had a leadership team that was under scrutiny as so much so that the legislature wanted an enforcement monitor. That leadership team, that leader and executive officer is now gone, and her leadership is gone, and so you now have an independent monitor and a new leader. And what I think to be productive here, I think what might be helpful as you write your reports and you continue to do your reports is to delineate timing and when things were. So that, like, what I can't tell sometimes is what is past and not happening now versus what is happening now that is right track, wrong track. Does that make sense? Because there's been so much transition, it's difficult for me to tell, is this being addressed now? Was it addressed before Dr. Brown came here? Is it something Dr. Brown knows about and is addressing in a way that you support or don't support? You know, that's what makes it hard for me as I read something like this. So.
If I could offer another
Yep.
option for addressing those concerns
Mhm.
inside of Mr. Frank's report, the sunset review that's happening right now that you've discussed in your meetings is in itself an opportunity to review this new period. You began a new reporting period after your leadership team left last year. Everything that we will be seeing in the next month, we will presume is under the new management. And if there's anything that you have concerns about in any other text, feel free to bring that to our attention. But we really believe in just letting Mr. Frank run with what he feels the need to do, and his extensive footnotes generally clarify what periods he's addressing. So.
And I would just want to echo Mr. Ma, and what my original question was several minutes ago was a question of timing. No one could have foreseen at our last sunset hearing and when AB 179 came out that we would be hiring a new EO in March 1st, and that at the same time our monitor that would happen at the same time that our monitor was also starting, and he would necessarily, the timing of the first survey would have to be March, April. I mean, that was just a necessary thing that had to happen. No one foresaw that we would hire a brand-new EO at that time, so the survey captured a lot of historical data and some current data, so there was a mix. So I think it's just an issue of timing, and we know that the wheel turns slowly sometimes when we have legislation involved and hearings and things like that. So if I'm not stating this correctly, Mr. Frank, please just correct me. I believe that when the monitor was when your services were initially ordered to happen, when your contract was initiated, my understanding is that you would normally go to a board, you've been to many boards before, and you would initiate your monitoring, but they wouldn't have progressed in the way that we have progressed with a whole new administrative team. You would have come in earlier. Does that make sense? Am I not correct?
I think I've seen the full range.
Okay.
I wouldn't paint them
That
all
it's
with the
not
same brush at all. Every one of them is a very different situation. I've been involved in 4, the dental board, where I was the monitor, private post-secondary vocational education, I was the monitor, and I was a subcontractor on both contractor state license board and or I was a separate contractor supporting the monitor on contractor state license board, and then I was a subcontractor to the Center for Public Interest Law on the medical board enforcement monitor. Every one of those situations was
unique.
was its own set of circumstances.
And I just want to also say that because the wheel does turn slowly in government, that the timing, the way things came about, is no one's fault. Everyone was doing their due diligence to protect the consumer and what we thought was best. I believe it was unusual that just the way things worked out, no one's fault, that you came on and we had an exodus of administration. We had our EO, assistant EO, enforcement chief, and 2 other managers all leave. We had a time of transition that we did get stabilized a little bit. And then, can you please tell me when your first day as monitor was?
I think it was March 10th, so it was about a week after Dr. Brown began. But I would just point out on the survey, we carefully constructed, one, it was There's like three questions, I think, that even dealt directly with the executive officer. That was really a minor piece of the survey. And those questions were very carefully structured to differentiate an assessment of the level of service and the quality of the service provided by John Brooks as compared, because we asked the question over the past year, as separate from the 2 years preceding that, which covered the tenure of Teresa Bella Jones. And going back further than that is sort of beyond your tenure on many of you members. This new survey, if you look in those areas, I'll just tell you flat out, I would be very uncomfortable. Wasn't the purpose of that survey, and I would be very uncomfortable getting into a situation where I was evaluating, or in any way evaluating the performance of your current executive officer. That's not my job. And the survey questions that were changed and used in that area troubled me from what I've seen on it. And
I'm sorry, there were no changes, and I want to go on record about that. It was the exact same question, so that's concerning.
So what I want to sort of focus us, if possible, back to the initial survey, is that, now I've lost my train of thought. Give me a second. Is that, I know when I filled it out. I know I took the survey. I took the first survey. And I know, even you probably have in your records, that I said, in answer to the questions, this is my answer, but, now things are different. Now we got a new executive officer. So the timing was awkward for some board members, but it was necessarily the timing because that's when your contract started and we had a transition of leadership. That is just how the cookie crumbled, in other words. So thank you for clarifying that the second survey was an internal survey. I think we're acutely aware of that now, and I will not make any reference to that being part of your monitoring activities in the future, and thank you for clarifying that.
I have a question for
Yes.
you, if I could. I understand, I think the draft report, which had the Appendix A in it, was distributed to some board members. Is that correct? Did some of you get the draft report and have
Draft
it with
report?
the Appendix A
Phase
in
one
it?
or phase two?
On the second report?
I didn't receive anything draft. Ms. Norton?
Well, we received an email that had, I believe, the responses of the second survey attached to it. Is that the report you're talking about?
So in finalizing the report, so that the survey itself wouldn't become a distraction from the report, I left in Section 7, which was derived in part from the survey, but not entirely from the survey, because as I mentioned, it also came from interviews and then some other information. But I deleted the appendix. It's not in the published report. Did you want that? You have that version, that draft version, or are you gonna? You do not.
And
Oh,
as far as
I
the
just
phase two report,
was
it's
interested
final
in the-
now, so the draft is not of consequence, I believe, because we have your final report now. And we're going to be entering phase three. So there was, please be assured that in no way was the results of the second survey attached in any way to your report or sent into anyone?
Second survey was never in there.
No.
But the first survey recap was produced, but then removed. So,
And I know we did receive a full report in, I think it was June. It had everyone's responses actually out. Was it in June when we had responses from people? You could read the response from the survey?
that's the June, the Appendix A,
Yeah.
the separate, the draft of Appendix A? Oh, did you get that?
No.
I don't know, I'm confused.
No, you presented to us, and it had graphs of how many members responded this way and what some of them said. That was in our strategic plan?
I never produced that.
That strategic plan survey comes from Solid.
I'm sorry.
That's a solid.
I'm sorry, just muddied the waters, because that was our Solid strategic planning session, that Solid did their own survey. there were a lot of surveys, floating around, let's say. So yes, Solid, in preparation for our strategic planning session, sent a survey to, and I confused them.
I guess I was just trying to get some sense from the board of what they might want me, whether they're interested at some point in actually getting the tabulated results of this survey or not, from the first survey.
May I?
Yes, Dr. Bass de Martinez.
Yes, absolutely. Tabulated data, raw data, if you'd like, would be very useful to some of us. I think all of us would like to have that.
So this
I
is,
did notice, and maybe it's just in my character because I watch verbal and nonverbal language. There was a statement made here, and I noticed you two turned to each other. Is there something we need to understand by that?
No, I'm not aware. I'm happy. I could incorporate that appendix in the third report as an appendix in that report so that the information's available to you to use for your purposes. If you're interested in that. Like, as I said, we were presented with the second survey. I was not agreeable to incorporating the results of the second survey in this second report. But, and that, you asked about that at the beginning, and I told you with certainty that I'm not going to do that. And the question still is sort of hanging out there. What do I do with the tabulated results of the first survey?
and I just want to be clear, just from a board perspective.
Did I get a direct response? Because initially, I was responding, and I apologize to my colleagues. I was responding to the question of would we like to have certain data? And my response was yes.
Okay.
And I made a couple of other comments, but it seems the response from you, from my viewpoint,
Okay.
drifted off. And so just help me, did you answer me, or am I imagining?
Well, you want to, could you, I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question. Would you like to restate your question?
You offered us some data, and you said if we'd like to have it, and I said, absolutely, I would. And I'm sure maybe my other colleagues would like to have that. But I do like to look at data and interpret it. And I added also, even if you wanted to share raw data, not to be confused with the first or second, but it was the data you said you were going to offer is what I'm asking.
Right, and that's what I did promise to do in the first report, and that's why I felt I'm still, that commitment hasn't been fulfilled yet in its entirety.
And so I apologize that I know that this report is actually much longer than Chapter 7, so I apologize for spending so much time on it. One of the things that when we reviewed it with Ben and the team, that we had issue with regards to that particular chapter is that that chapter, particularly your narratives, say things like you don't feel like you're getting supported by the EO, and we really wanted it on. Mr. Frank's report went so far as to include data as up to the beginning of September, and we were really concerned that you did not have a pre and post. And so while there's continued, so to publish that, I think, and without, as Mr. Ma said, without a caveat that you were referring to a historical leadership, I think was irresponsible and reckless. And so what we did is we used the exact same questions, no changes to any of DCA's produced questions, and we submitted that again. And that was so that you can have a before and after. We appreciate that Mr. Frank doesn't want to put that in, but we do believe that it's inappropriate, it's irresponsible to submently say those narratives of that the board did where they thought very low of their leadership without acknowledging where you've come from and what you think of your, and those questions were related to actually your support and your leadership and whether committees were active.
I honestly don't remember the questions. I'm embarrassed, maybe not embarrassed to say. I felt like I saw several surveys over the last 6 to 9 months. So from my point of view, I would like to see the responses. I think transparency is the best process. So if folks are okay, I don't know who owns the data or the responses, but
Let me interject here,
Yeah.
because we were going on and on and on about the surveys. So we have determined that the second survey is an internal survey. It's not going to be attached to your that's enough talk about that. Now, the first survey, would it be an imposition to you? Do you still have the data that you could provide to us regarding the first survey that you had previously talked about?
I have the data, and I also have the, if you will, draft Appendix A that was included in this draft second report and was removed in the process of finalizing the report, which you were then given. And, so I can.
It's
It
possible.
can be made available to you. I think we'll have to just work through the process of getting that packaged for release, and whether that is as part of the third report, and we just work it into that process, because that's going to happen so quickly anyways, or there's some more expedited way to
Maybe I'm
get
not-
that to you. I think we need to regroup and work on that.
I'm not expressing myself very well today,
Okay.
apparently. So what, in my mind, I'm thinking of, and I believe, if I'm reading my fellow board members correctly, is we were talking of just an informal sending of the, informal, in quotes, sending of the information to review by the board members, not of it being any part of a report or published, but that we would like to see that information in general. Is that possible?
What I'm assuming you're asking for, so when we administered that survey, we promised sort of confidentiality, and some members submitted it anonymously. Most of you identified yourselves in it. I compiled the results, so there's, like I said, a 10-page recap of the results. There are summaries, listings of all of your comments, so that, because some of that's very valuable information, not just the answers, but the comments. It's packaged into a work product. It was submitted to the board, your executive officer and chief of enforcement, and Brian, back in June. I finalized it, kept it as an appendix, but then removed it. I can give you that. Of course, I have the backup actual survey statistical summaries, and I have each of your individual surveys, which you know of because I called you and
I don't think
talked to you about it.
need to reduce anonymity. Okay, so I think the summary.
Do you want the actual survey, the individual surveys, or do you want my recap? I'm sort of prepared to give you my recap, but I don't know if you really want each of the individual surveys.
I don't want anything that has someone can be identified.
Right, because it's got questions about, are you a VN or PT, or are you a public member, and how long have you been on there, and there's other, and the comments themselves give people
So
away.
this is not something that we have to get stuck on, is what I'm trying to say. If there's the information, board members have expressed interest in seeing the information. The one concern that we can either agree to disagree on or whatever, but we need to move on from, is that the concern from some board members has been that that survey, the results reference the administration of John Brooks. And now we have a new administration, so we would not want the legislature, the agency, to read that and believe that it references the current administration. That was, I believe that's the underlying thread, and that's all that's being said.
I don't know, that's not exactly where I'm coming from, but.
But I just want to be clear that, so you guys, because I pulled it up right now, the one that he did from April, and so that's the only sticking point I'm trying to say. This, again, he has a robust report that's bigger than this, but it's specific to that, chapter. For instance, there's a question that says, the question says, over the past year, has the board been effectively fulfilling its mission, goal, and objectives there, in the board's strategic plan? With that question, there were actual responses that you guys were referring to, but you guys weren't referring to now. For instance, we have at least acknowledged the strategic plan. There was also a question here where, do you feel like your the EO is supportive? That you got, if you take that out of context, because there's no date, you guys are actually making reference to, and only one board member actually said, I'm referring to John Brooks. So that is what I mean. I think you guys should have all of the data, but I think that there needs to be context around it. And when Mr. Frank initially put it in, he did not include that context.
So you could send the information to the board members. We now know the context. We know when we filled out the survey. We know who we were referring to in our surveys, because we did it. This is not a third party. We completed this survey. And if that is not an overly difficult task for you to give to board members, I think certain board members are asking for the information. It doesn't have to be attached to a report, doesn't have to be published, it doesn't have to be that formal. But now we understand the context, and that many of us were referring, if not all of us, to the Brooks administration, not the Brown administration.
So,
Yes, Ms. Norton.
I have a headache. I don't know how a question that's formulated over the past year could have any indication that we would be referring to anyone other than John Brooks. So I don't think
If it's published
because,
now, it'll be the year.
The problem was his narrative did not call that out. And so that was the reason that staff tried to support him by resubmitting the report. That was the only issue, was that the narrative did not provide any timeframes. The narrative actually built off recommendations that said, we need to have more engagement with legislature. Well, we know today that that's not accurate. But in that response that you guys were referring to, and there were 2 board members that actually said, I'm not sure that this is necessarily Mr. Brooks' wheelhouse, but I think I feel confident about Kamika. I had only been on the job for 4 weeks. So it was that type of lack of context in the narrative and in his summation that we had issue with.
so that could all be cured by a narrative being done, or I'm sure that the legislature, when they read that, they're going to, hopefully they would put 2 and 2 together, that the survey was taken just a few months after, a few weeks after Kamika came, so that the responses were for that, not for now. And if that's not the case, then that would be problematic, because you would be shedding a light on something that is incorrect. I can say for myself, the questions related to the EO, when I answered the questions on the first survey, I wasn't even responding to John Brooks' administration. I was responding to since I'd been on the board. My commitment to this board is greater now because we have Kamika here. My faith in her turning this around, my faith in what she's trying to do, the faith in what the committees are trying to do is really profound based upon this leadership. And I would hate to have that misconstrued in any way. All of that being said, because like I tried to talk like 20 minutes ago, and I've almost forgotten what I wanted to say. So as a board member, I mean, I know that since we're still in this chapter 7, as far as board member training, I don't know that there's any training that you can give someone that's going to prepare them for what they're going to face being a board member. And it's kind of an on-the-job training type of thing. But I'm a little bit concerned because this is volunteer, I mean, we volunteer our time to be on this board, and some of what's coming out of these recommendations is more and more work that it seems to be that you're relying on the board to do with the advent of these. We should have more committees, the committees should meet, the committees should do recommendations, the committee should do this. I'm not so sure. I think that the staff should do that, and that we should get, as a board, we should get a report back, because I'll be frank with you, I can't join another committee. I can't give any more of my time, nor should I have to give my time for the day-to-day runnings of the Board of Vocational Nurses and Psychiatric Technicians. This is a, this is a board. I don't know where I'm going to go with that, but that's concerning to me, that the answer would be for us as board members to take on more and more of the runnings of this. But us as board members need to be cohesive and be present, but to actually take it on, I don't think that's the idea. I don't think we can do that, no matter how much training you gave us as board members.
Can I follow up? At our last meeting, Mr. Frank, you had mentioned, and you used the terminology, a robust enforcement committee. And this, I had the same thoughts as Member Norton, and I'm wondering if you can give your thoughts on the additional time commitment committees that would require to obtain the knowledge, really, to be able to understand all the intricacies that you have provided in your report of Ms. Bales, even of yourself. You've spent 8 months invested in this, and you you have more knowledge in some of these intricacies than I know I do. So how can I get to your level with the constraint of what is that time commitment going to look like? How do you envision that? Is it feasible? I was thinking very similar thoughts.
I recognize and I understand and I'm sympathetic to the time constraints. My recommendation is made in the context of the 10-year or longer history that you've had no committees. And I wouldn't expect, and I don't think any other reasonable person would expect, that this board is going to go from a 0 in terms of the activity level of its committees to a 10. But if you move to a 1, that's better than a 0. And the first step in that was, call it reestablish your committees or establish your committees or reactivate them or whatever you want to do. Define a charter for what you expect of those committees, what's reasonable, what can be done at this point in time with your capabilities, and begin having some meetings, okay? And start working on the backlog of things that this board has not been attentive to for a long period of time, which led to being surprised, which was the comment that many of you made about your experience in 2013, 14, and at the sunset hearing in 2015, that it was all a surprise. The more you can kind of get a little better information, be a little closer, meet with people other than the executive officer from time to time. Meet separately with the chief of enforcement, the supervisor of the complaint section, separate from the executive officer. Meet with the NEC supervisor, meet with the chief of licensing, get a little more information, get familiar with that person, develop supplemental lines of communication and information to give you a better sense of what's going on with the board's programs and operations. If you are, as many of you expressed, totally dependent on the information you get at your quarterly meetings from the executive officer, many of you commented, I was given this form to evaluate the executive officer, and I had nothing to evaluate the executive officer on other than the information that the executive officer provided to me at the quarterly meetings.
And I appreciate
That's not oversight.
I appreciate your comments, and I want to just say for the record that we have moved beyond 0 with our committees, as all these board members can attest. Every board member on this dais at the moment is on at least one committee. They have all met, and the interaction between management staff that you're referring to is occurring in these committees because there are staff representatives in the committee meetings. Each committee has its own flavor. Charters have been developed. We've been voting on at the last meeting, and we'll do at this meeting, on the roles and responsibilities. Our education committee has gone full steam. Enforcement has gone full steam. Executive has been established. Practice has met. Ledge has met. So I strongly feel that we have moved far beyond 0, and that we have established committees that not just in name only, but in practice. And it has been a new and sometimes difficult thing for the time commitment for board members. I recognize that. And I appreciate staff's also input, the extra work that they've taken on for those committee meetings. And the things that you're talking about, the interaction with staff and board members, is happening more. Our strategic outreach committee, we have many committees that we've, as you know, we've created, and they have met. And I think it's rather miraculous. I think that's what you said. It would be almost a miracle that we have done it. I mean, let's just say we have done it. We went from having 0 activated committees to, I think we have 8 now. They've all met. They're all assigned. Every board member is participating, and staff. So I'm actually a little proud of that.
Well, and that's where I don't see any real daylight between what I'm recommending and what you're doing.
Yeah, so if we're...
Sort of the idea.
And that's a great segue. I'm glad you brought that up because I want to let the board members know that we cannot move on until we take some action on these recommendations. So I believe that's where we need to go at the moment, it being 3:54. Now, I just have my own notes, so I would like to get the conversation started. I agree with you that we are currently, some of the things that you've recommended, and there is a time lapse in report, and practice committee just met a couple weeks ago. Some of this that we're already doing and we've already initiated. So I would hate for it to seem like there's a recommendation for it to be done, but we are already doing it because the recommendation doesn't say continue meeting with the AG's office. So I'm going to throw some thoughts out there to get the ball rolling. I'm sure my board members will have comments.
Clarification
Yes.
point here. For this next step of what we were going to do, does that require Mr. Frank's time? I mean, I would like to be respectful of, unless their board members have questions of Mr. Frank. I mean, I appreciate the recommendations he's presented. I think they're quite clear. There are many of them. So it's almost like you can throw the dart and be like, hey, where do you want to start? But I just want to be, and if we have to do this, if this is the next, I know there's another person who needs to speak, so I don't know if we want to do this now or give the next presenter an opportunity.
No, that doesn't require DCA or Mr. Frank. You guys are also, remember that we're being webcast, so this is, recorded as well as we're having minutes. So whatever you guys choose to do and how you motion, he doesn't have to.
And I just want to also put it out there to you that you're not being dismissed. If you would, if you agree to stay, you may also stay. But as Mr. Moss said, being respectful of your time, you may or may not, of your choosing.
I was more saying if any board members feel that Mr. Frank's presence is necessary for them to make a decision about the recommendations, then I would ask Mr. Frank to stay. But barring that, I would let you be.
I'm
so.
here, I'm happy to stay. I don't have a plane to catch or anything.
All right, fair enough,
So it's
fair enough.
not a long time from this point, so.
I'm also
available
mindful.
If you have more questions, and if not, I'll listen.
Okay, I was also mindful that someone from the Attorney General's office is here, so I knew we were on a time crunch, so.
So, okay, I need an answer on timing and legality, and I have all the important people here to answer my question. This has been submitted to the legislature. We have to now give our response by December 1st. Our sunset review packet is due, yes? December 1st. So we need to make recommendations on these, or we need to move on these recommendations before December 1st.
Correct.
We need to do that today.
Pretty much, because you guys won't be together. But you guys are actually, what you would be doing is you were deciding to take the report and then subsequently the recommendations, which ones that you agree, disagree with. If you agree with them in total, you accept all of them. But that's actually how we as a board, as staff, move forward on actually continuing to partner with Mr. Frank.
So we need to decide today which of these recommendations we want to accept so that we can formulate our response.
But some of these recommendations are ones that we are already started and have in place. Therefore, how are we going to move on something that we already have in place that he's saying we need to recommend, yet it's already there? And he didn't say continue, he didn't say anything else, but they are there in place.
So we get to choose. We can accept recommendations in total. This is my understanding. Please correct me if I'm saying something incorrect. Yes, ma'am.
May I clarify? If you want to do the accepting of the recommendations for your purposes for the sunset report, that's up to you. It was not the legislature's necessarily intention for you to accept or reject the recommendations in the report as part of that process.
Apologize. So, and we could probably talk offline if you need to, but Assembly met with us. So you guys remember for Sunset, we're actually under Assembly. And they did actually say that if we choose not to, or if we have another mechanism that can validate these, that then we don't have to accept these, and then Mr. Frank would not have to actually carry out this information. So that was what I got from the chief consultant for the Assembly. So just those.
Perhaps that's something we can talk offline about.
Fantastic, but that would.
His report is separate from the Sunset Review report. So-
Oh, no, no, no. The report is separate. Our submission of our recommendations is that.
Right, you can do that in the Sunset Review or not.
Mr. Deerking?
I just have a point of clarification. Insofar as the report's already been submitted to the state legislature, wouldn't we just receive and acknowledge the report rather than making a motion to accept?
You can receive and acknowledge, because some of these do actually have staff time allocated to those. You can also decide to accept or reject. That's per my response from the Assembly.
So,
I'm sorry, I had a clarifying question about what was just said about the, on the Assembly side, and if we don't accept the recommendation, how that might impact the
okay.
the monitor. So, Kamika, could you kind of explain that a little bit?
It's actually similar to what he's done with the other boards. So if you guys, the board does not have to accept any other recommendations, and subsequently, if you have a, my understanding is that if we have another validating method, similar to what Ms. Mendoza said, that say this is being conducted and we can validate this and provide documentation, say via the internal audit process or something, that we can actually move forward that. And that was the direction I got from the, who will actually be drafting our sunset, is my understanding.
So certain of these recommendations have implications with staffing and resources, specifically 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5.6, and 5.7 have staffing and resource implications. I'm putting it out there that I believe we previously initiated 4.4, 4.6, 4.7, 4.9, 5.8, 5.9, 5.11, and 5.13. This is exactly what I said at the last board meeting. I'm just reminding you. Yeah, I'll try. We're currently doing, and is also monitored by the DCA internal auditor that we have, thank you, 4.2, 5.13, 4.1, and 6, or sorry, 6.1 and 6.2. And the ones that I completely agree with and accept, 4.11, 5.1, I also do not disagree with, and think it could be referred to Enforcement Committee, 5.10, 5.12, 6.2, 7.2, and 7.3. Do not disagree with, and think it could be easily handled and referred to Executive Committee, 4.8, 7.1. And the last two, I do not disagree with it in any way, and think it could be easily handled by our Ed Committee and in conjunction with our DCA internal auditor, is 4.3 and 5.5. That's what I'm putting out there. Would you like to say that?
So moved.
Second?
So there's a motion on the floor and a second. At this point in time, we need public comment, either from those at the desk or those in the audience. Any comments you'd like to make? Yes, ma'am.
Just to finish your question, Eric, sorry, Mr. Ma, from previous, we've been hanging out for so long now.
Yeah, Eric.
As far as what recommendations going forward, and you mentioned DCA and the governor's office and such, I would love to include the legislature in that as well, and if you'd like to set an agenda item at a future meeting, we can get the Senate and Assembly to come and demonstrate our timelines and what we can do to help you. We do have budget authority as well, and have been put on BCPs and legislation, omnibus bills, and things that we may be able to help you out with going forward.
Yeah, I mean, from all this experience, it's clear to me that either I grossly misunderstood or I was misinformed about the process and procedures of certain things, including budget change proposals in the past. So I have to almost reprogram my brain, which is hard because if I'm lucky, I remember it, but I've now remembered the wrong thing, so it will help to get a re-education for myself.
If it helps you any, it's impossibly complex.
Okay, good. I'll just forget everything and then.
Might not get any clearer.
We'll give you numbers of people to call, though.
Okay, great.
So we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Had public comment. Any further discussion by the board at this time?
I don't like that this is so rushed. I feel rushed, and I don't know if we need to be rushing this process. Like, I haven't had a chance, I mean, I couldn't keep up with the recommendations you endorse, and so I just wonder, do we have to do this so rushed?
Well, we have to do it before December 1st.
Yeah.
So we need to do it today, and it's.
What I heard is we didn't need to. I mean, I heard that we have time.
It needs to be, we are submitting our response with our Sunset Review Report, which is due December 1st.
But I just thought I heard you, yeah, I thought I heard you just say that.
This wasn't requested as a part of the Sunset Review questionnaire. If you would like to include it in the Sunset questionnaire, that's something that you can
Right.
do.
Let me clarify, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. We have the right and the ability to give a response to the monitor report. We, because we tabled the item, did not send our response with when it was sent to the legislature, okay? That's why we were meeting in October, so that our response could be sent when this report was sent to the legislature. However, this item was tabled. Now we have lost the ability to send our response to, at the same time as the report goes to the legislature. Our other option is to send our response at the same time we submit our Sunset Review materials. That is December 1st. So we lost our first option. We now have a second option if we want to respond, which I think we should.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I wasn't here at the October meeting, but this sounds like it was a self-inflicted wound, meaning by us tabling it, we've hurt ourselves, right?
I would agree with that.
Okay, well, yeah, okay. Can you tell us, since there's a motion been made, right? Can you tell us again which ones you're saying so I can at
Yes.
least,
And
like I'm following
do not have my
along?
glasses, and I have scribbled on a piece of paper, so
Go ahead, sorry.
please let me.
Samantha, would it be easier, because I read all of these, and they're all mostly common sense, good recommendations. The only issue, some of them we're already doing, so would it be easier to go the other way and say,
Ones we're not going to implement?
yes? Which is a shorter list, or else you're going to have to do it a lot slower, because I couldn't even keep up with you.
I have,
Go ahead.
I see where you're going with that, and I think I like to work in the positive and not the negative. So I would like to actually state the ones that we have no concern or we think have not already been implemented, that we're not already doing, that there's no concern or disagreement about. And my notes that I've scribbled here say 41151.
411?
41151. Then with the caveat of, I have no disagreement at all with it, and I think it could be monitored by the enforcement committee now that we have one.
411 and 51.
Yes. No, these, and then I'm going to go on to some new ones that, again, no disagreement, I do not think are already implemented, and could be easily referred to our enforcement committee, is 510, 512, 62.
Hold on, 510.
Hey, you're going way too fast. Can we just go through the book? Can we just start here and go down?
510.
I mean, I can't even flip the pages that fast.
Sure, I'll slow down because I have them written in the linear form and not in the, these are. So, again,
510.
these are what I'm putting out there, that I think have no disagreement with and could easily be referred to the enforcement committee. 510, if you go down to 2 boxes, 512, 62, which is on the same page, I believe.
I know what page you're on, so.
Page 3 or 4 on appendix, attachment A. 7.2 is on the next page. And 7.3. Again, next set is no disagreement in any way, and I think could be easily referred to the executive committee to monitor and handle, are 4.8 and 7.1. Again, I feel like I'm calling bingo, 4.8 and 7.1.
4.8 being develop and propose legislation.
For default action, yeah.
For default actions.
We're already doing that.
That's correct, and that's why she's saying have it monitored by the exec committee.
And then refer to combination of the education committee and also our DCA internal auditor, which we have one of those as well. is 4-3 and 5-5. Those were, again, 4-3, 5-5. Those I thought could be easily referred to the Education Committee or the DCA internal auditor. The other recommendations, either we are currently already doing or are rejected, or, I'm sorry, not reject. Trying to read my writing. Have labor and staffing implications that this time is just not a, something we could do. And other previously, were previously initiated, I think, are the other ones. That, those were my opinions on those ones that they've been initiated already, so I would hate for it to seem like it's a new recommendation when it's previously initiated. That was my thought, as one board member.
Could I ask a question?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Clifford.
You had mentioned the DCA internal auditor. Would they be implementing that?
No.
or just-
Already doing it. They're already
I'm saying it's
monitoring
already being
those.
done.
They're already monitoring those, so we would continue to report out to the intern.
Would be in charge of making sure it's done.
The internal auditor is already, for those items she's referring to, the internal auditor. So just to clarify, so the first two that she was referring to, those we would continue to partner with Mr. Frank, as well as the additional timeline that he has for Phase 3 to make sure, and so that you guys can validate that that's actually being done. The next set that would go to the Enforcement Committee, we would be providing that reporting data to the Enforcement Committee, because those are already being done, and those were in fact Enforcement Task Force recommendation. The final set, which is related to the Education Committee and the DC internal audit, those also we are doing on a quarterly basis. And so the DCA is already taking that data from us, so we would be coordinating with internal audits for that.
And again, I just wanted to get the ball rolling. I put that out there. Open to other suggestions. So there's, we do have a motion on the floor, so we will have to actually vote on that. And if that fails, we can have another motion. No big deal. We've had public comment on motion. So I think at this time, if we're ready, I'd like to take a roll call vote. Like I said, we need to vote on this before we can make an alternate motion if this fails. So let's just go on with the procedure and see what happens here. Mr. Deerking. It says, as I indicated, with the caveat on some of them that they would be referred to the committees. I just thought that that was something that looked like committees could be handled.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Ms. Norton? Mr. Vertito?
Yes.
Vice President Moreno?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm just keeping up. I guess, yes, I will vote on that. Ms. Mendoza?
Yes.
Dr. Basti
Yes.
Martinez? Mr. DeBrownstein?
Yes.
Mr. Ma?
Yes.
Okay, so we have an 8-1 motion that then passes in the majority. Oh, I'm sorry. Correct. Mr. Deerking, I misstated, was no, and he was actually an abstention.
No, that was
Donna.
Donna.
Okay, let me roll back. We have an 8-1 vote. We have 8 in the affirmative.
801. You're tired.
Yeah, there's no caffeine allowed on the dais. So, yes, so, that's what we were told, was there's no caffeine allowed on the dais. So I have water, which is apparently not adequately fueling my neuronal synapses at this moment in time. 8, there is a vote on the floor, which is 8-0-1, 8 to the affirmative, 0 for no, 1 abstention, which was Ms. Norton. believe that is correct.
And just so, since we were doing numbers, and so then with that, the next thing that staff will be doing is that for 411, that's complaint case coding data, so we will make sure to fashion that for Mr. Frank. And then in regards to 51, that is in regards to complaint intake data and establishing a separate, I'm sorry, let me just make sure I'm reading this right. Yeah, and so we will also provide that data. The remaining data, we will work with those committees and internal organizations you've outlined to provide them that data and adequate reporting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for everyone. I believe Mr. Kingsbury is still here. So at this time, I would like to take Agenda Item 22, Attorney General Enforcement Update. Good afternoon, Mr. Kingsbury. I appreciate your, no, you have to press the green button. I appreciate your assertive communication this afternoon. Do you have materials for us? Or
I have a very small amount of material for you. I actually just intended to, I just got put on the agenda kind of at the last minute to come and do a little 10-minute talk. It's not clear to me how much of what I'm going to tell you guys you already know. And so given that you may or may not have some of the information that I'm going to give you, if you already have it, just bear with me. The first thing I wanted to do is tell you who I am. You guys, a lot of you will recognize me. I've done petition hearings before you. That's what it is.
Recognize you from somewhere.
And so the other role I have is I'm the liaison for your board. I've been the liaison since about 2012, I believe, if I remember right. And I don't know if you guys know what a liaison does. Sometimes I don't know if I know what a liaison does. But there's kind of about 4 different areas that, in theory, I do, and I do when I'm called upon to do them. So the fact that it doesn't happen doesn't necessarily mean that it shouldn't have happened, but I do what I can when I'm called upon. One is to try to communicate and kind of facilitate communications between the program. And by the program, for me, my perspective is only enforcement. Like, that's what I think about, right? You guys do a lot of different aspects. Your work on the board is a lot broader than the little kind of corner of the world that I live in. But in terms of communications with the staff about enforcement, the idea is I can be kind of a person who can kind of get the communications on the AG side and share them with management on the your guys' enforcement side, and kind of go the other way as well. And I do that a fair amount. I think the thing I probably have been doing the most of is counseling staff on enforcement issues. So I'm in fairly regular communication. I know Gina's been out a little bit just recently, but I'm in regular communication, I would say, with probably about 4 or 5 different members of the kind of executive staff. I haven't had the privilege of working with Kamika that much, but I work with Gina a whole lot, Rocio a whole lot, some of the investigators, and so providing counsel about enforcement matters when those things come to the board. And the other thing, a couple other things I do is that I've done a lot of training, and I've trained a lot of investigators, and you guys have kind of a new set, or relatively new set of in-house investigators. They're not, I guess they're really not new anymore. They've been there for 2, 3 years, 4 years, but they do need some training, some of them, and we've been working to provide that. And the last thing that, in theory, a liaison does is that I come and give little updates to you guys, and so that's kind of what this is supposed to be.
Great.
To give you just the big picture on what enforcement is, because I think you guys already are going to know this, but there's, when you think about enforcement, there's basically, we think about 5 different steps. One is when the agency receives the complaint. The next thing is the investigation. And I think Mr. Frank's report went into this, but you guys basically, the way you do it is you have kind of a desk investigation section, which does a lot of your convictions and subsequent arrest reports. You also have a field investigations, which are in-house unsworn officers or unsworn investigators that do go out and interview people. And then you send at least more recently, you've again been sending cases to the Division of Investigation, the ones that are more egregious. Also, that's also concurs well with our advice with respect to certain types of cases, categories of cases that occur in certain facilities. Certain facilities, due to privacy rules, technically, Division of Investigation has more authority than your in-house unsworn investigators do. So you guys are doing that well. Everything's perfect in that regard. You're shipping out the cases that need to go to DOI, and everything seems to be working well. So that's the second step. The first step, receive a complaint, then you break it up into investigations, then you get the referral to the AG's office. And so that's kind of where, I'm going to talk about statistics in a second. And the statistics I talk about are going to be once we get the case to when we're done with the case. You give it to the AG's office, and then basically the next step is usually it goes to the default position is that it would go from our office, then it gets transferred to OAH through an administrative hearing, and then from OAH back to you guys, and that's when you see all the proposed decisions. You also get our stipulations, which is we can shortcut the OAH step by settling the cases.
Correct.
So real quick, give you a little bit of statistics, and these are just our statistics about, or actually just one statistic, which is the most important one. It's the one that we always look at and that is most looked at, and that is the time from receipt of the case at our end to adjudication. And to give you an idea, or to clarify what that means, adjudication has kind of its own definition. For us, adjudication is when we are done. And so done can look kind of like a few different things. One version of done is when we send the case back to you because for some reason the investigation wasn't thorough enough, or there's just not enough evidence, or there's some reason to decline prosecution. That's been happening a lot less, and that's a good thing. The second way that cases are come to end, or what we call adjudication, is defaults. They don't file a notice of defense or whatever. I saw Mr. Frank's recommendation. I think it's an excellent one to have the EO granted the authority to just get those out.
Just one clarification, because it would be negligent if I didn't say that was originally an Enforcement Task Force recommendation from 2014.
Excellent. Well,
It's also in Mr. Frank's report.
It'd be great to get it done, if it's not already done. I don't know. I noticed there was some
We're working
concern
on it.
about whether it's continuing already or whether it's a new.
We're trying to get it rolling.
Perfect. And then the other two are, finish the hearing. That's another adjudication point, or settle. So the statistic we look at is from when we receive the case from one of the types of investigations to when we reach one of those endpoints. And our current, and we only look at accusations, so statement of issues and petitions to revoke and PC-23s. These are other types of cases that come to us. You guys are all familiar with them. Those are not within the statistic, but this particular statistic is the most looked at, which is for accusation cases, and our average case time is 418 days. That means we're keeping cases at our house, so to speak, for 418 days, which is over what we want to be doing.
Yeah.
I noticed your face, you kind of crunched up at that, but go ahead.
Yes, that is definitely, we have a history of enforcement delays with total processing time, and to me, yes, over a year, that does sound like a lot. However, I know there's a fast-track pilot program that we're engaging in.
Right, and so that's kind of that's the main thing I wanted to talk to you about today. Because I think from talking to different people that you guys may have had in the past, at least, a misunderstanding about how broad that's gotten. Like I said, though, 365 days is our goal at the AG's office, and so we're over that by 53 days. So I want to talk to you about two things that we are already doing, these are already continuing doing, in order to try to bring that down. The first is what you just mentioned, which is the fast track program. That's a subset of your cases can be handled just on short cause. There's no witnesses that need to go to the hearing, and usually these kind of cases can settle. And if they can't settle, we can get them done pretty quickly at OAH. So the fast track pilot program, which is I think what you guys may have originally been informed about, was just in San Diego. Mm-hmm. And so they did that pilot program for a while. It had three basic goals. One is to try to bring as you guys know, and I think Mr. Frank mentioned in his report, you have an inordinate amount of these small short cause cases. In terms of your just licensing population, the types of cases that you have to refer to our end of the world in order to adjudicate, an inordinately large amount of these short cause cases. So the fast track program, to the extent we get it up running more and more, is inordinately benefits this particular board. So it was only in San Diego, and they started it, and they did some different things, and they tweaked it, and they found some things that didn't work. And so the kind of news that I'm bringing to you is that now that's been expanded. And so now, as of 2 days ago, we kind of turned it on for the Bay Area. So now we have 5 statewide DOJ offices that handle your cases. And so now there are 3 of them participating in the fast track program.
San Diego?
San Diego, Oakland, and San Francisco.
And is the BVNPT automatically enrolled or included in the participation in the fast track program at these new locations?
Yes. Currently, we are working only on U and RN. And RN is sending many more of the cases than historically LVNPT has. But I think that was a communication issue that got worked out, and I think going forward, from what I understand, everybody's on the same page that there's going to be a lot more referrals with the I don't know if it's a blue sheet of paper on the top or whatever it is that says fast track and suggests entry into this program.
Can I give a little form and shape to some of the numbers?
Could you, I'm
Can
sorry.
I give a little bit of context to some of the numbers you're referring to? Is that okay? So just for example, the San Diego office is small, and this was something that was also a correction I had wanted to make in the enforcement monitor's report. So for us, we send over 98 cases to the San Diego office. So I want you to keep in context that that's 98 cases that should belong in that office. Those are not fast-track eligible cases. So for last year, we sent over 11 fast-track eligible cases. Of the 11 that we sent, all 11 were accepted. Just to give you context of how that measures between the BRN, BRN sent 1,700 cases and 300 were approximately 300. So I just wanted to balance that just a touch. The year before that, we also had 98. We don't know how we had 98, but we had 98, and of that, 65% of the cases that should have been accepted were in fact accepted. And so I think it ended up being 9 or 10. It has more to do with, for us, whether or not that's a natural catchment area for us. And we have stood up a fast track only desk that is dedicated to this and to make sure that we push more through. I do believe that we will see more as the program expands, both for the Bay and should we one day get into LA, where we actually have more of a catchment area there. But I just wanted to put in context, because it's the exorbitant is actually not 100% accurate. It has to do with in how you say the statistics, and so I just wanted to call that out.
I also want to commend you on assigning a specific analyst. I think that's something that BRN did. I know I had nothing to do with it, but whoever recommended that, or if you came up with that by yourself, Dr. Brown, I think that's a good idea, and I think that's going to help get more of those cases, and also kind of help to have a point person on that particular timeline, because we're kind of treating these cases a little bit different, and we want someone to be able to interface with the attorneys that are assigned on those cases in order to kind of better understand, and just so expectations are more aligned with how things are probably going to go. In terms of what's happened so far in San Diego, it turns out, I mean, as Dr. Brown said, it's only 11 each year, basically, that's been going there in this program, and basically they're all settling. So that's a good thing, and it's a good thing in part because those are cases that otherwise fall in line with all the other boards and bureaus and get assigned a hearing date. And historically, the thing that we've always done is rush to get a hearing date because we want. I used to work for a judge, and the judge I worked for always used to tell me, he said, you know, you don't take a continuance of a hearing in order to try to settle it. The hearing settles the case. Like, cases don't settle until right before the hearing. And so, like all these other cases, we can't get those hearing dates closer. And somehow, by turning it into something where we're going to jump on it immediately, try to settle it, and then if we can't, the hearing date we're going to get is within a month. And that's something that our section, the head of our section, the SAG, has worked out and dealt with OAH on, OAH, the Office of Administrative Hearings, in order to find kind of a sweet spot where most hearings have started to settle. So there's calendar entries, calendar openings for these short cause matters in the very quick future, so that settlement or hearing, it's going to happen quickly. And so, like I said, you guys are going to really be an inordinate beneficiary of this program to the extent it gets off and running. So that's the first thing, and I think it's really good news, and I think, like I said, particularly for this board, really good news. The second thing is that, and this is a very minor thing, but I work pretty regularly, and I've been working pretty regularly with your in-office, in-house investigators who are unsworn regarding kind of best practices in terms of investigations. A couple things that, I mean, one thing that they've started doing is regularly tape recording respondent interviews, and that helps to make everyone remember exactly how the conversation went down. That's one of the things that I think is a great idea. Cases settle when there's certainty about how things are going to go, and having a tape recording about what was said at a particular time is always more certain than not. That's really all I got for you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have otherwise.
Do board members have questions for Mr. King?
Just briefly.
Sure.
We're short here. Just some of the criteria for the fast-track referrals?
Well, the key is that it'll be a short cause hearing, meaning less than a day, or less than half a day or less, and no witnesses. And a couple of the other things are that it needs to come over as a fast-track referral. Certain documentary things need to have been established during the investigation.
Which would be done by BVNPT staff.
Correct.
And the difference between our non-sworn investigators and those assigned to the Division of Investigation, they're PC 832, right? They're sworn officers?
They are sworn officers. There's also particular statutes that apply to certain types of facilities where officers of DOI are provided more leeway in terms of what they're allowed to work with. I don't know if that's what you were getting at?
No,
Okay.
that's fine, thank you. What are the other offices associated with the fast-track referrals? You said there were 2 in the Bay Area, Oakland, San Francisco, San Diego, and then there's 2 more?
No, that's it. There are 2 other AG offices that are not yet on the fast track program. And I would hate to say it, there could be a 6th out there, but I'm just not thinking of it right now. The other ones are at least LA and Sacramento.
What can we do to facilitate the processing of fast-track cases? Have you done, is there any idea about training? You said you've gone over best practices with our non-sworn investigators. Is it something we can do at the intake level to identify those that are specifically
Yeah, I think typically, and this kind of goes back to why your board is going to benefit so much, is that a lot of these types of cases tend to be subsequent arrest reports where there's a conviction, something where a kind of a principal adjudication has already occurred, or, and those are the kind of cases that are going to your desk investigators. So that's really probably going to be the fountain from which these cases are taken. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's fine, thank you.
Ms. Norton?
Already answered.
Do other board members have questions for Mr. Kingsbury? Mr. DeBrownstein?
Couldn't help yourself?
Yeah. From your perspective, what's the top area that we could improve on? Either something we should be looking at or some quick fix? You know, something bigger that we should be looking at in the future? Or is there something small that is easily fixed, from your perspective?
I honestly think you guys are, I guess not you guys, but your enforcement side has done an amazing job over the last year, I'd say, year and a half, of putting everything into order. I mean, the idea, and I don't know to what extent this is happening, and I hear your question, and your question is forward-looking. And for me, the things that stand out are all backward-looking and thinking about, I honestly think you guys are doing a much better job. Like, everything over there is going more smoothly. And I'm not just saying that because, you know, they are my client in all my cases. But you should expect that I would say that. But that's not why I'm saying it. In fact, I mean, the idea that citation settlements now are getting done by the EO, like, that is extra days on everybody's clock that can just get done now. And it was the EO that issued the citation in the first place. So it should be fine to have them reduce it financially. Things like that. And the idea, like I mentioned to Ms. James Perez, the default thing, I know you're working on it, that's great. Those are more free days that we can all, you know, and we're always, on a DAG level, you have to remember, I'm just like a line DAG. I just do cases, right? And so usually, at least in my office and in my own experience, we're looking at each case and saying, like, how can we win this in the best way? Like, what can we do with this in terms of, you know, what is it going to look like at hearing and these things? But I will guarantee you that the people who are above us are, I can say my SAG, who is kind of the head of the section statewide, is all about trying to shave off time and help you guys with your, you know, your number. And that number is this average days from receipt of the case, different from ours, but not that different, right? Receipt of the case to when you're done. And
Also known as Performance Measure 4.
which one's that?
Performance Measure 4 is something that in our performance measures is the complete time from overall processing time.
Yeah, and so when you look at these kind of segments of cases, and you can say, well, you know, if we could shave 30 days off each of those, and what that does is it just the overall picture kind of goes shortening, and it's overall it's a benefit, and I think you guys are doing a lot more of those things. I also think your investigators are, I've been working with your new supervising investigator, and they're trying to set out some protocols to get people doing things the same way and getting it done, like, so that there's not as much confusion and loss. And I think they're trying to do it right, and I think you guys are on the right track. I mean, that's all I'll say.
Great, thank you. Do other board members have questions for Mr. Kingsbury?
No, but could he say we're doing a good job one more time?
I would like that, actually.
No, I wasn't going to say this, but now I will, which is that, you know, I understand, and I've been sitting here through the meeting, and I watched you guys talking to the monitor, and I read the report too, or at least as much of it as I could get through, and I didn't read it as a negative report. I read it as, here's your guys' chance, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this. I feel maybe I'm a little twisted in saying this, but here's your guys' chance to just knock it out of the park, because you guys, the things he's pointing at, you guys are doing. And so really your response should be, great idea, we're implementing it. And you can just say that over and over again because you are. Like, everything is and like I said, maybe I shouldn't say that, but from my perspective, I think Mr. Frank said, like, the amount of daylight between what I'm recommending and you're doing is very narrow. And I see that on a lot of these things. And that's actually just a chance to be like, respond with, yes.
And I would agree with you that those are not new ideas, something that our board has already come up with and been working towards. Those are not new recommendations, but something that we have been working for. And I think we should be proud of the work that we've been doing. As you mentioned, especially in our enforcement division, we have been working very hard. So I thank you for acknowledging that. Do board members have further questions from Mr. Kingsbury at this time? There is no motion required on this agenda item. I thank you for your presentation. Thank you for staying. Okay, so yes, we did indeed take 22 and 23 out of order. That takes us back,
21.
let me get there, see what we're dealing with. 19. 24, 22, 26, 19. I apologize, give me 1 second to catch up here. Okay, okay, so this is our Enforcement Committee report. The members are in our Enforcement Committee are Vice President Andrew Moreno and Mr. Deerking, board member. Before we get into the actual report, I would just, I've been advised to issue a word of caution. I know there is, included in your report is a section on cost recovery. I don't know how else to express it, except that it grieves me deeply and frustrates me immensely to hear that we may not be able to actually have the discussion about cost recovery today. And that was per legal counsel advice. So Mr. Deerking and Vice President Moreno, for board members, a reminder that this was emailed to you by Ms. Anderson. This is the report that was emailed to you by Ms. Anderson. We have received and reviewed your report. Do either members of the Enforcement Committee have any thing they would like to highlight or share with us at this time?
Just a point of clarification. So in terms of not discussing it, so it's not even up for discussion, it's to just ask general questions. I know that some of the board members had asked in the past. The Enforcement Committee met, we talked about it, it's not an action item, so is it not possible just to discuss the methodology or?
My original understanding was if there was no motion associated, that the board could have discussion. I was advised earlier that that may not be the case.
So this is really standard Bagley-Keene advice. You guys see your agenda item 20 doesn't mention cost recovery. So because it's not listed on the agenda, it's not an item for board discussion today. There was no notice to the public, but that doesn't prevent you at all from bringing up which items you'd like to agendize for future meetings.
So we did, at one of the meetings, like 2-3 meetings ago perhaps, it was requested for a future agenda item to be cost recovery.
I agree. In this particular case, when it was discussed which items would be discussed by the board, that item wasn't brought forth.
So then you're saying that, because I think in my mind anyway, we have an enforcement committee now, and cost recovery is part of enforcement, so you were saying that we would have to specifically call it out, that we were going to discuss cost recovery in the enforcement committee report?
Yes, per Bagley-Keene, items you're going to discuss need to have been on the agenda.
So does that mean, for example, in our Enforcement Committee report, we have the fast track pilot program? If that's not specifically stated, does that mean that can not also be discussed, or?
I think where it falls within enforcement performance metrics, you appear to be covered.
So that's the umbrella term that would cover.
The fast track would be included under performance metrics, yes?
That would be my impression. This has to do with a program update. It has to do with performance metrics. I would entertain the idea that that provides enough notice. But yeah, again, we had, there were, in discussions about what it is the board would like to discuss today, these were the items that came forth. The role of the Enforcement Committee and the update of enforcement performance metrics.
So I hear Ms. Norton's frustration, and I echo it times a million.
Cost recovery written all over the front of this piece of paper.
I know. I can't say that I understand it, but that is what has been the legal counsel that we have been given. I don't know what needs to happen, and I know it's not my responsibility, I know it's not board members' responsibility, but we have been asking meeting after meeting after meeting to discuss cost recovery. And all I'm saying is this must be on our February meeting agenda. And there is not, it is completely unacceptable after the agenda has been published for us to be notified that if hypothetically, that we cannot discuss it. In some fashion, whoever needs to take accountability, whoever that is.
Right, well, I assume it's the EO. I mean, this is, I mean, who develops the agenda, right? It's the EO and the staff, right?
And it's looked at by council as well.
But
That's absolutely true, and once again, in every discussion had, I tried my best to determine what it is the board would like to discuss. And I try to flesh that out so that you're facilitated in your discussions. This item wasn't brought up at the time at which we were reviewing agendas.
And what I'm saying, looking forward, is that anyone, I'm sure members of the audience who have been to our board meetings have said, these people want to talk about cost recovery, and they've talked about it for the past 3 meetings that they wanted on their next agenda. So I think it is very well known, and if it's not, let it be known at this moment that cost recovery, any further delays are completely unacceptable. And that this should be on our February 2017 agenda. However it gets there properly is not the responsibility of this board, but just putting it out there to those who are responsible that it needs to happen.
Just put under agenda item 27.
So, no. Mr. DeBrownstein?
No, I believe you were clear in that title, cost recovery, needs to be its own agenda item. I think legal counsel agrees. I know the EO is able to carry that out. I think you've been clear.
I certainly hope so, because we're not going to revisit this again. Let me just put that statement out there. So-
Just to be clear, this is nothing new. From a legal standpoint and the legal office's analysis, you can discuss whatever's on the agenda.
Okay. No more discussion on that. We're on the Enforcement Committee report. So those sections other than cost recovery, Mr. Vice President Moreno and Mr. Deerking, is there anything you would like to highlight for us or any comments you have on the report?
No, just in the idea of robust enforcement, I've received positive feedback from Dr. Brown about my visits to begin coordinating visits to some of our offices so I can actually observe and perhaps make some recommendations in a report.
Thank you. Vice President Moreno?
Well, I would draw the attention of the board for comments and feedback. We have put together for consideration Attachment A, which kind of looks to define the role of what the Enforcement Committee will do, and if there's any feedback from my colleagues on that Attachment A.
Yes, and thank you for pointing that out. There is actually we do have a possible action on the role of the Enforcement Committee. So Attachment A, I believe, was what you're referring to, is the document that is the role of the Enforcement Committee. I know board members have had a chance to look at that. That is something that we actually do need to take action on to either adopt that or adopt it in full as written or amend it in some way. Thoughts from board members? Mr. Vertito?
Having read it previously, I think it's well-written. It delineates very clearly the role and each component of the Enforcement Committee. That being said, I move that we adopt the role or the definition for the role of the Enforcement Committee as presented.
Second. Been moved and seconded. So at this time, there's a motion on the floor and a second. I would like to entertain public comment on this, on the role of the Enforcement Committee and the document included. Is there any public comment at this time? I don't see any. Further board discussion?
Is
Mr.
there a way,
Ross?
sorry.
Go ahead.
Is there a way that we can also include the AG's office as a ad hoc member, or just let them know that there is a meeting being held? Not that they necessarily need to attend, but just that they are informed. And possibly, and I don't know the time frame on this, but following the meeting and the acceptance of their meeting minutes, that be forwarded to the AG's office?
Sure, I'd like
Just as an
feedback.
information item?
Sure, I'd like entertain feedback from our enforcement committee on that suggestion.
I don't see why not.
As far as best practices, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
We can extend the invitation.
If it's helpful, it might be more clear on the last paragraph if it states either the committee meets routinely or meets quarterly. I think it's not clear if it's done sometimes quarterly, or
About routinely, at least quarterly.
I think that would help.
So they meet regularly, routinely, at least once a quarter. That leaves the door open to more meetings if needed, yes? Yeah? Okay. The maker of the motion, would you like to amend your motion to include that correction?
So moved.
I'm not sure who seconded.
I'll second it.
Okay. Second. So the the motion with the corrected language has been put forth. Any public comment on the corrected motion? I don't see any at this time. Further board discussion? At this time, I'll take a roll call vote on the corrected motion. Mr. Deerking?
Yes?
Ms. Norton?
Yes.
Mr. Vertito?
Yes.
Vice President Moreno?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Ms. Mendoza?
Yes.
Dr. Bass de Martinez? Mr. De Brownstein?
Yes?
Mr. Ma?
Yes.
So by unanimous vote, the motion passes.
Can we still ask questions about the report, though?
I'm sorry, Ms. Norton, I couldn't hear you.
Can we still ask questions? I mean, we're not done with this, right? Because all we did was, we defined the role of the committee, but we haven't had an opportunity to ask questions.
Yes, we voted on our motion. Is there further board discussion on the Enforcement Committee report?
Yes, I did have a question.
Please.
So on performance measure 8, I'm guessing it is the probation violation response. It says the average is 30 days, but it's actually 1 day. Can you explain what that means? And if it is 1 day, are we, I don't understand. Because we've had situations where there has been violations of probation that have gone on.
Yes, I did notice that performance measure was very low as well. Dr. Brown, would you like to either address that, or should we bring Rocio up?
I can, give me 1 second, could I see?
Ms. Norton, would you be able to just, repeat your question briefly?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the length of time it takes to assign a monitor to the case. Oh,
No, it's the probation violation response.
Response PM8?
Your mic is not on.
It
Performance
is,
measure
I'm
8.
not on.
So basically, what that means is that we're actually doing well, which means from the time that somebody is actually that they reported a violation of their probation, and Rocio, correct me if I'm wrong, that we are actually assigning them a monitor. We're actually doing that probably in real time is what that means. Out of all of our performance measures, the one that we are still struggling on is actually PM4. But in terms of that one, that means that we are actually exceeding by getting them a monitor quickly versus the 30 days that it takes, which is the DCA set standard.
So, I think I understand that, but we have witnessed occurrences where that's not true.
Okay.
Because there have been people that have violated their probation, and it has been a number of months with no response to the violation of the probation.
So I can definitely unpack this and look into this. I think what happens is that because it would be an average, it's going to include, it'll be dropped down if there's a whole lot of 1 days, right? And then you have somebody that's 2 months, and then when you call those all together, you don't see that blip. So I can definitely find out what's behind that so that I can give you a little bit more granular data.
Because what I wrote down was, we shouldn't do it too fast. We should do it correctly.
Right, I would agree with you on that. Any further board discussion about the enforcement monitor report? I'm sorry, enforcement committee report. I don't see any at this time. The one motion that we've had has been adopted. I believe that we can move on, and in fact, there is late-breaking news in the halls of government. There's late-breaking news, and I believe, from what I've heard, that there may be a correction in the way that we can accept or reject the enforcement monitor's recommendation. Is that true?
Yes, yes. We just wanted to clarify, Sarah Huckle again with the Senate Business and Professions Committee, and my colleague.
I'm Vince with the Assembly Business and Professions Committee.
So to clarify in statute with regards to what the board's involvement is in the enforcement monitor process, it's in Business and Professions Code 2847.5, if anyone wants to follow along. The board and its staff shall cooperate with the monitor and shall provide data, information, and files as requested by the monitor to perform all of his or her duties. That's the first part. We understand that there are some concerns, staffing and otherwise, with accommodating all of the requests. At this point, I would encourage you to do what you can, and we've spoken with your EO, and Dr. Brown has agreed to identify some specific concerns, and the legislature will meet with your staff and, with your permission, see what we can do to make any accommodations. As far as accepting or rejecting any of the recommendations, if you would like to do that, that's not required by any means. You can either do that in the sunset review by December 1st or outside of that process. We look forward to your comments on that as well.
I just want to make sure everybody, because Sarah did a nice job of, she's referencing from AB 179 in particular, and she did a great job of laying that out. The reason why I'm bringing that to your attention is that, so of those 29 recommendations, there are a number of those are duplicative. We will still have to direct and divert staff attention to getting those to the monitor, whether that be a duplicate report or whether that be a report that he is creating. So I want you guys to be aware of that. Also with that, so when the board made up stating that there other committees could oversee that, that does not negate that we will still have to provide staffing resources and for some things that you guys may, like for instance, that one report that he has that is quite extensive and actually will require a lot of staff time, we have to do that. We would also have to be involved in all of the coding stuff. So I'm just giving you an idea of how that works. And so some of that will actually negatively impact other reporting areas, but I want you guys to appreciate that.
So I believe I'm understanding correctly. Please. And it's 4:56, but please correct me. I want to get this right.
It's Friday, it's Friday.
I want to get this right on the record. So, yes, the recommendations that we accepted, I don't think there was ever any doubt that those would include coordination with staff, because they obviously would. But it was the ones that we chose not to adopt that I had brought up had some staffing concerns. Those ones, we need to change that?
Unfortunately, your acceptance or non-acceptance is irrelevant.
Okay.
If you would like to communicate that to us in your perspective on the report, we'd appreciate that information, but that would occur outside of this process. So your obligation is to comply with all of the recommendations to the extent that he needs to be able to do his work at this moment. But in the meantime, to the extent that it is jeopardizing other aspects of work, we'd like to get together the legislature and the enforcement monitor and your staff to see what we can do to sort of ameliorate some of those staffing concerns.
So the impression we were under previously was incorrect, and that impression was that we would vote either to accept or reject the recommendations.
No, you can still do that internally. That's an entirely valid process, and I think it's important to your...
We already voted on it, yeah.
Yeah. But as far as what you need to do, as far as the enforcement monitor report is concerned, it does not impact that process.
Okay. I think think I understand you.
I think if I understand it, what it means is that regardless, we have to comply with all 29 recommendations, whether we agree with them or disagree with them. We still have to comply.
And that does include the one related to HR, the union one. I just want everyone to be aware. And because in the complaints and probation units, we have an anticipated vacancy of 37%, we will be mindful that there are going to be other areas that are going to suffer in regards to that.
Right, and you can disagree with them, but the statute requires that you cooperate with his information requests, and the timeline for compliance is quite long, and you can explore different appropriate levels for the next couple of years.
So as far as his recommendations, one of them was like moving positions or reclassifying positions. That I can see as a problem.
I can't comment on that because I don't know what that is, but at the moment, if you could comply with his requests, I don't believe as far as implementation that has to be done tomorrow, we can discuss that, and it's something that you could comment on in the future, but as far as his data and informational needs, it's something that needs to be complied with.
And I think it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyways, that I'm sure the agency understands that the staff we have productivity targets, and a reclassification will involve labor negotiation, things like that that are out of our control, or needs of the board for to run day-to-day operations.
Sure, and that's all very helpful information if you'd like to prepare a sort of a supplemental informational report as part of Sunset or otherwise about your concerns with some of the recommendations going forward.
Sure. So do we need to take any action on the new information that you?
No, just wanted to clear and support your EO in any things that she is concerned about doing or not doing as the direction of the board, so.
And yes, the very first day I talked to Mr. Frank, the first day he came on, and I even had in email, I said, it is my expectation that board staff will cooperate fully.
Definitely, definitely.
That was one of the very first things I said to him. And I've talked to staff and asked them about the cooperation and have been assured that it is good. Gina is out. Let's just put that on the record that Ms. Bayless, our enforcement chief, who was his primary contact, is out. So we've had to make some accommodations and change who the primary contact is. We've had to do that out of necessity just because of Ms. Bayless's leave. But the new contact is Dr. Brown, and she's quite capable of coordinating.
And I apologize for taking up all this time in the board meeting, but your capable EO is in touch with both of us. So if you have any further questions, she'll let.
Thank you very much, because I want it to be accurate on the record of what we're doing, so legally. Thank you. Okay, so we have 21, 24, and 25 left. It's 5:01. Is there any interest in tabling these?
Let's just skip 21.
Okay, skip 21 for right now.
All right, fine, let's keep going.
With 21, we're only accepting the report.
Okay.
The legislative items that are listed here, the session is basically closed and over.
Okay.
We do look forward to some of these measures being seen in a different form or bill number next cycle, but we'll watch for that and report accordingly.
Sure. My one question to the Ledge Committee was that there were some that had support on there, but you say the session is over, so our support is not relevant at this point.
I move we accept the report.
There's a motion and a second, which means at this time, we will need to ask for public comment on the Legislative Committee report. Is there any public comment at this time? Is there further board discussion on the Legislative Committee report? I would like to thank our Legislative Committee. I think we have two very capable committee members, and I think that this is something we haven't looked at for a while, and I'm glad we're looking at it. With that being said, I'll take a roll call vote, starting on my far left with Mr. Deerking.
Yes.
Ms. Norton? Yes. Mr. Vertito?
Yes.
Vice President Moreno?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Ms. Mendoza?
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Basti Martinez said yes. Mr. DeBrownstein?
Yes.
Mr. Ma?
Yes.
Okay, unanimously, that passes. I'll ask Dr. Brown, 24's update on discontinuing pocket card licensees. Is that?
So you guys have actually tabled this before, so I just want to give you a brief overview. So if you're aware that as a board, we are trying to do everything we can to reduce costs as well as to be much more, utilize cloud, be seamless. And so with that, we will be discontinuing pocket card. That does not mean that we will not be issuing a way to verify the license. The issue is that a lot of people like them, and what happens is that they may have it, but then the next day they actually may have their license revoked, and they're walking around with a card that gives the impression that they still are active. And so we are going to, in the trend similar to most other nursing boards, we're online, with the implementation of Breeze, online verification is where we're going, and it'll be our sole means. It does save us $50,000 per annum. And so that is a benefit that could be the equivalent of a person, if not two. So I just wanted to make you guys aware, because by this time next year, we won't have pocket cards. We are doing a lot of branding and information so that the public is aware, and so that hospitals and other agencies are aware of how they can verify a license. So I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention.
Is this an action item? Do we need to?
No, it's operation.
To approve that? No?
No, it's operation.
Well, I like, if I could, I like the alternate option of the one-time card to have to check the DCA, the one that you offered in the presentation.
The one that has
Just the date of licensure.
Oh, okay, we can look into the cost of that. We have to be, the system can be a little bit persnickety, and so one of the things that happened was when we attempted to send out renewals cards, we ended up sending out, and it just had to do with the Breeze issue. Instead of sending out one card, we sent out two, and we got charged for both. So I just try to be very mindful of anything we do as far as, well, let's just do one, but just do the date, or because sometimes it can be a little bit glitchy, but we are moving toward online verification for the most part.
And is there a projected date, if this were to move forward, a projected date for the discontinuance?
So effective September 2017.
Oh, okay. So it's a while. September 2017. And obviously, our licensees will be notified, and
I have Vanessa actually is here. We have a great team that's actually is spearheading to make sure that there's a lot of public communication and that we are outreaching. It's not just a pull, a push, it's a pull that we're letting people know how this is going to happen, and so that, because once it starts, there'll still be a 2-year lag time for those who may be looking for a renewal card, right? And so we're making sure that it'll be prominent everywhere it needs to be.
thank you. I think that we're finished with this item. The only other thing left is item 25, discussion and possible action on augmenting board meeting frequency. Do we want to take that up now?
Well, I could just put it out there for you guys, and if you want to bring it up next time. So here's the issue. So more than 60% of you said that you would be open, because of our marathon board meetings, that you would be open to either A, meeting quarterly with one meeting having 3 days, or B, meeting every other month. And so I just wanted to put that back on the table. As we have, with more NACs comes more review. More review comes more needing you to sign off. That's not including as our enforcement department becomes more kind of nimble in what they're doing, that's going to require more probationers or more people to come before the board. Finally, as you do more things with the committees, that is going to need to rise up to the level of the board for review. And so with that, we need to consider how we're meeting, because currently we're meeting and it ends up being 12 to 14-hour days that has diminishing return on the board members.
And yes, we do find ourselves at the point with more NECs, more committees, that more work is being generated as enforcement starts taking off. We will need to hear more disciplinary cases. That leaves us in the position of having very long meetings, which we've been having, or maybe adding an extra day somewhere. 3-day meetings, I feel, are a lot. I don't know how other people feel. Maybe one intermediate. Mr. Ma, please go.
What's the frequency of the other boards? How often do they meet?
So for instance, the BRN, again, I appreciate it's a larger size, but they meet 10 times a year. I want to also call out that they meet 10 times a year, and that's not including how their discipline committee, who is going to make recommendations for the board, meets pretty frequently, more than quarterly. Their education committee also makes decisions and then subsequently takes that to the board. That also is more than quarterly. And when they do meet, they're meeting, because of those committees, are meeting once a day, but then in various places in the state. And then their board meeting is twice a day.
So
Twice.
once a month for a one-day
And
meeting?
2 days.
2-day meeting.
For 10 months.
For an 8-hour meeting?
Yeah, usually it's, my understanding was at a full-day meeting when I spoke with President Jackson. Is that not correct?
It's 2 full days for their board meetings, and it's 1 day for their discipline.
That was my understanding. Now, of course, they are a larger board. I do want to, also, in respect and to board members, you are correct, we have talked about that we have work schedules. We are not full-time board members. It's not a full-time job. And I know that you all have work commitments and other commitments. I love having everyone here. I wish everyone was here all the time. I wish we had all 11 here all the time. We had 11 members. That being said, just putting it out there that we only need quorum to conduct business. Not that I would wish anyone not to be here, but if it becomes a overwhelming strain, know that we only need quorum to function. And there have been days when, meetings when 1 or 2 or 3 board members have not been here, and we've still conducted our business. So I want
I think
you to know that's an option.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. I mean, I think if we are going to increase the frequency, we just have to make sure we have at least 7. I mean, I know 6, but 6 doesn't allow for one person to step out of the room. So
No one gets a bathroom break.
my point is like,
Yeah.
this doesn't really square up, and this is not. I would have said this if Ben were here or Mr. Frank were here. It doesn't square up with we have enough resources, saying that, and then saying we're being stretched out. You know, we have full plates. The staff have full plates. I don't know how that squares with saying we have sufficient resources. So, to me, I'm always sensitive to the impact of how it has on staff, including my suggestions that I want to make for the next meeting, because I know these things take time, and so I don't even want to say it, but I'm fine with increasing the frequency, and if we can't make quorum, we can't make quorum, and we will have to revise the administrative manual potentially, because it's a bit punitive in tone when you don't make a meeting, but how about the medical board? Does the medical board probably is not as busy as we are, I assume, because physicians aren't nearly as.
So one of the issues that you guys have that's unique to this,
May I
I'm so
please
sorry.
have a 6:45 flag?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin, thank you.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Me.
Me or Todd, we live near you, so you can be I'm on the 8 o'clock if you need to. I can give you a ride home.
One of the reasons is because of our mandatory reporting that we have, and so then that increases the number of petitioners, and that's something that's unique to us in terms of impact. The other thing that we've considered is that it may alternate, because remember, some of this is your meetings are impacted, at least from the NACs, by how they can draw down Pearson VUE NCLEX data. And so that data will not there's certain times of the month when that data is available and able to then for you to review. And so one of the alternatives that we thought of was that if you meet more frequently, it might be on some occasions that you're looking at an enforcement report versus other days you're looking at the education committee, but it also will impact your school data depending on how much you meet or when you meet in the month.
Mr. Vertito.
Thank you. There's always a possibility. We used to have one meeting a year, normally February, where it'd be 2.5 days. And perhaps not every keep it quarterly like we're doing now, but I don't know if it'd make a difference of having 2 3-day meetings instead of 4, instead of 2 and 2, 2 days and 3 days versus 4 2 days. Because as you said, it takes time for the staff to accumulate the data. And good example, and please no slam on the EO or the staff. They were scrambling with 2 committee meetings, a board meeting within the last couple weeks. So I think we need to really space it out to allow staff time to take a breath and prepare for the next meeting. So quarterly, but have it maybe 2 and 2, you know.
And like I said, things do come up. It came up in, when we had John Brooks here, it's come up with our current administration that sometimes because of timing, things that we have to submit, we have called for special meetings in between board meetings. So know that that can happen, and that has happened and does happen. Don't be surprised when it does. Mr. Brownstein.
Do we need a motion on this to carry it through? I would.
Let me take a stab at it, if that's okay with you, Mr. Brownstein. I would move to have our executive officer, give our executive officer the flexibility and the delegation to research the need for increased frequency of meeting and schedule as needed in communication with board members. No, is that not right?
I mean,
Okay.
I think we need to look at the workload impact of increasing the meeting frequency first. In other words, let's staff up or make the request to staff up. And if we're not going to be staffed up to a level that we can do our job, and then let's not increase the meetings to only then thin us out more. So that may impact licensees who want their licenses back, but they have to wait. They just got to wait. And
So just remember that while these things are going on, and this is standard operations, that we also have an internal audit that's every 3 months, as well as with the acceptance of these 29 recommendations. One of them is an enforcement monitor report that's different from the DCA report. That's that's required to be every 30 days. That particular report, we had previously 2 employees dedicated to that data, not including that the enforcement monitor would meet with the chief of enforcement for 8 hours a day, several days during the week. And so now that we've had a loss in 2 different departments of 3 people, I just want you guys to be mindful that we already are taxed, and we have less than a 12% vacancy rate. The amount of reporting that is being demanded of the board is huge, and finance unfortunately did not approve any more positions for us, so we are at a loss.
So, I heard what you said, but I think that I would like to see if there's a possible way that, as a board, we can be more efficient in the days that we do have, instead of stretching it out. If we can take a look at where do we get jammed up, and what can we do to prepare ahead of time so that we don't get that, so that we don't have that jam up. So I would like to see that looked at before the answer is just simply to increase the days that we're going to do.
And some of the stuff that's gone on behind the scenes that board members might not be aware of is the executive officer and the management team actually looked at how the agenda is put together and tried to streamline some things. Reports now are given by Dr. Brown, and it's escaping me, certain reports. Streamline in our meetings. We have, as you all know, do not have breaks now. You all get breaks as you need it, but corporately we do not. We've cut out several things actually. We've looked at, and we have done cuts. So there has been a cutting of fat from the meat already, and it does not seem to be sufficient. And in fact, what is being reported from our staff, the managers of staff and our executive officer, is that the work is increasing, and that there's going to be needing, our agendas are just going to get fuller. At the same time that we are slimming them down, they will be getting fuller in content. Ms. Basting-Martinez.
Well, an observation and a recommendation. While I realize for some of us, it's really challenging to put in more time than was originally believed needed to be put in. That said, it is clear we have to have or do something more to get meeting time together. I would strongly recommend that whatever we do, we try to put the dates out far in advance.
Agreed.
So many of us live in different places, live different lives. So everyone can plan and focus, if at all possible, to be present at those times. And so trying to make some decision earlier than later for the year 2017 would be very critical.
I agree with you. So at this time, we have also been signaled that we need to wrap up, start wrapping up to vacate the room. We either need to move on this or table it. Honestly, we're out of time. So, Mr. DeBronstein, Dr. Basti Martinez?
I would propose that we let the EO and staff propose some dates to us and some structure to what this might look like.
Is that your motion?
Absolutely, I so move.
I would second that. Any public comment on the frequency of board meetings? Seeing none, any further board discussion? This time I'd like to,
This
yes,
just basically means that Kamika can tell us when the next board meetings are for
we're
2017
going to propose some
and
extra dates.
propose, okay.
Propose some extra dates, yes.
Because we don't meet again until February, so, okay, so propose them as soon as possible, I guess, right? 'Cause,
And yes, I think we're all aware of the,
Okay.
so I'll take a roll call vote, starting with Mr. Ma.
yes,
Mr. DeBronstein?
Yes.
Dr. Basti Martinez?
Yes?
Ms. Mendoza? Yes. Vice President Moreno?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Vertito, Donna Norton? Abstain, thank you. The last one that we can do in 1 minute
I'll
is,
suggest also just make these in Sacramento, if they're easiest on the staff, you
Right,
know,
that's
make that-
also-
yeah.
that's also-
But, like, we don't need to rotate them all over the place.
agenda item number 27 is suggestion for future agenda items. I thought I heard board members saying they would like to put something on this. Is there any, no, Mr. Ma?
Hearing what I've heard, I'm not going to give more work to the staff, so I'm fine. Nothing I have here is urgent. It can wait.
The cost recovery is what was bantered.
Yes, I 100%
Made it very
agree.
clear. 27 is the appropriate location.
Thank you. At that time, do we need further public comment? Yes. Okay. At this time, we will take public comment for items not on the agenda. I need to read a little notice to you. Individuals may appear before the board at this time to discuss items not on the agenda. The board may not discuss or take any action on any item raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the agenda on a future, place the item on an agenda of a future meeting. This is pursuant to Section Code 11125 and 11125.7A. Any public members at this time would like to address the board? Nope, I don't see any. Thank you very much. That leads us to agenda item 28, adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
I second that. We need to roll call vote on that? No. Okay, meeting's adjourned.
Okay, we